Yes, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome back to another joint national governing body webinar. Today, we are doing an online Better Belaying webinar. We've got loads of good information for you guys today. Hopefully stuff that you will be able to learn from and lots of practical advice that you can go ahead and use in your own work. I am Robert Mackenzie. I am from Mountaineering Scotland. I will be your host for this morning's webinar. I will be handing over to our panelists shortly to run the presentations. We've got some amazing presentations for you guys from seriously experienced people. And I will be back along with Damien and Scott a little bit later on for the question and answer sections. Let's have a look. Where is the schedule for the day? So here's the schedule for the day, if you can see it. I'll do my little introduction and then I'll be handing over to John Garside from the BMC to run the first session. I'm going to hide this. Talking about the sort of practices of better belaying, good practice. We'll break. Once John has finished, we'll do a good question and answer section, and then we'll have a break. You guys can run away and get some food, get some drinks, mentally prepare for the second session, and we'll be back with Raymond Lee from Westway to run the second session, and again we'll finish off with a nice big question and answer section. So today we are joined by two extremely experienced climbing professionals. I like how John smirked there. And this time we've tried to mix it up a little bit. Instead of just hearing from people that work for the national governing bodies who don't necessarily work in climbing walls any longer, we've got John Garside from the BMC and Raymond Lee, duty manager from the Westway Climbing Centre down in London. John, let's do an introduction. Not only is John a winter mountaineering and climbing instructor, international mountain leader, bet you didn't know that. He has been the BMC training officer since 2004. He's worked with mountain training over all that time in the creation and the development in a lot of the qualifications that we all hold here, including the Climbing Wall Instructor Award, the Climbing Wall Development Instructor Award, and all of the coaching awards out there. So he is the guy that has literally wrote the book on what we're going to talk about today. Lately, and most relevantly for what we're going to talk about, he has been running workshops on how to teach better belaying and how to encourage good practice from our experienced and old school members in climbing walls. And who better to talk to in dealing with customers than current duty manager at the Westway Climbing Centre, Raymond Lee. Raymond and Westway have been kind of pioneers in tackling the issues with bad belaying over the last wee while. And their experience in dealing with customers and their belaying and how to tackle these situations, I think will give us lots and lots to learn from today. So these are two of the best people that we could have got to talk about this topic. So I am going to hand over to John. We're going to kick this off. Welcome to the online Better Belaying webinar. If my other panelists could hide their videos, I'll hand over to John for our first presentation.
Great. Hey, thank you, Robert. As always, you should like get into comparing like gigs and stuff, I reckon.
This is my side career.
Great. Welcome this morning, everyone. So I just want to sort of check everyone can see that okay. Yeah, looks like.
Yep, everyone can see it.
Don't know why the top bar is still there. Hopefully that will disappear at some point. Okay, so yeah, so I'm John. That's my email address. So all these slides can be shared with you. So feel free to email me about anything I discussed today. And if you want copies of these slides, I can send them to you. So we're going to talk about teaching belaying today. And just go through my slides. Here we go. So maybe I'm setting myself up for a fall here, but I want to sort of think about trying to address these three learning outcomes. And that first one, maybe some of you are very familiar with, but it's about language. And I think it's really useful just to sort of think about language, the way in which we think about describing belay devices. I think also we want to think about, factors that contribute to belay device choice, and hopefully you'll sort of learn some new ideas for teaching belaying. So what I sought to do with every single slide here is each one should have something to take away for you to consider or reflect upon when it comes to teaching belaying, be that to children, be that to adults, or be that maybe like a refresher course for people who need maybe some upskilling, which is something that Raymond's going to touch on further in the afternoon. But fundamentally, we're talking about behaviours here. That's what we want to think about. How can we improve people's belaying behaviour? And also, I think it's useful to think about this. This is something that Dan put up on the beginning of his presentation, the last one in April it was, talking about personal protective equipment, PPE. And when we sort of think about what we're all trying to do here, be that the Mountaineering Council's Mount Training, ABC, ultimately, we want to sort of, people going to climbing walls, having a great time and coming back. That goes across everything we do, and we seek to sort of create an environment where that can happen. So also sort of, we want to bear that in mind when it comes to belaying, because we don't want people to have a bad belaying experience, because that's going to make them feel nervous, and we don't want people to feel that they don't know how to belay, because that won't make them feel confident. Yeah, so it's got to be addressing for both the climber and the belayer, obviously. Okay, I'm starting with this. This is sort of maybe an odd place to start, where we think about instants and near misses. So you may be aware that the BMC, we launched this instant and near miss reporting database a few years ago. And the reason I've brought it up is, first of all, it can be a useful place to go to when you're thinking about sort of the behaviours that people display, which may have a poor outcome. It doesn't mean they're injured. And this is, you can easily view the database. If you just type in BMC instant and near miss database, you'll find it. And you can sort of type in some parameters in the search box, like dates, type of activity, in this case, indoor climbing. So when you look at all the indoor climbing instants that have been reported, then over half of them involve belaying. So that is not just to say that, the majority of any kind of instant that happens at a climb wall is belaying, because lots of people might, strain a muscle or, pop a tendon, if, something worse, for example. But when it comes down to maybe an instant that people think, gosh, this wasn't great, I really want to share this with the wider community, then when it comes to that, which are probably more serious incidents, then the majority are belaying. And if you look on the right-hand column, you can see that the majority of these things don't actually result in injury. So that's a good thing. But it's therefore also really good that people are sharing it and recording this. These are all user-generated reports, so it could be the climber or the belayer in this case, or it could be a witness, and some are witnesses like, oh, I saw this happen on the wall, or, this wasn't great, etc., etc. But I think maybe something for yourself to think about, and we're going to look at a report on the next slide, is also that if you sort of see things, and it could be, it often is, I mean, most of these reports are recreational climbers, by the way, this isn't sort of taught people, then if you sort of see some poor practice, then it's sort of worth recording in your own wall, whether you have an instant or near miss kind of reporting system. Because if you think something's worth reporting and therefore worth sharing with management or sharing with your colleagues at your wall, then it's worth recording. If you think it's worth recording, it's worth recording. So sort of a take-home message from this is trying to sort of think about how you might record these things at your wall, and how you might, if only just share them internally with other staff, so you can think about any sort of trends that are maybe worth addressing in some way. And we're going to talk about more of that as well as we go through this presentation. So here's one incident that is self-reported on the database. So that's how it was sort of described. Okay, so there are a few sort of alarms here, big weight difference, and the belayer saying, oh, I had a worn device. It's over 15 years old, so you can assume it's quite a worn device, this. And then here's what happened. So the climber slipped. Okay, nothing strange there. People fall off all the time. And the belayer was a bit distracted, wasn't necessarily paying full attention, and the climber hit the ground. So that's not a great outcome. Luckily, the climber wasn't injured. Only the belayer had some rope burns. Okay, so that doesn't sound sort of a great outcome, but luckily, no one required hospital treatment. But this is really useful to read as well. I mean, this person, has had this incident, gone home, reflected on it, thought, crikey, this wasn't great. I want to share this with a wider community. And he's also reflected about lessons that may learn from this. And he's identified that his device was slick, worn. He was also distracted. He suggested maybe a different device might have been appropriate. In this case, assisted braking device. And we'll talk about this issue as well, whether or not people might think that certain types of device might help manage risk more effectively. What he hasn't learned from this lesson, which I suppose the one missing thing to me, is he hasn't thought maybe I should just retire this device. He's identified the device is worn, but the lesson doesn't include, maybe I should just throw it in the bin or, recycle it at the local recycling centre. So I think, climbers can often be guilty of this, and this is definitely something that if you attended last session was touched on quite a lot. Every piece of equipment has its lifetime, whether it's a pair of jeans or a belay device. And, you should definitely be retiring climbing equipment long before it needs retiring. Yeah. So that's maybe the one lesson that maybe hasn't been learned there. But when it comes to yourselves teaching belaying, then you may find incidents on the database that are useful to share with some of your customers, or you may find reading them helps you sort of think about how you may teach things. If you're sort of seeing like real life incidents, where people have come a bit unstuck. And obviously, many of you may work outside, so there's hill walking incidents, mountaineering, rock climbing, outdoors, etc. So there's a whole range of stuff in there that you may find useful. But that is just a user-generated report database. There's limited amount. This is open access research here, so you can just read this paper online if you want. It's quite well, a lot of academic papers can be a bit heavy going. This is all very easy to read, this one. And it's written by Volker Scholfel and some of his colleagues. You may have heard of that name before. He wrote a book called One Move Too Many. He's a very good sport climber. He's also a hand surgeon. He sits on the UIAA Medical Commission. The UIAA is like an international umbrella body for organizations such as the BMC. Football has FIFA. We have the UIAA. And so Volker's done a lot of work around injuries. And this is a pretty comprehensive analysis, over 500,000 climbing wall visits over a period of 5 years. And just sort of looking at, where it went wrong, what sort of accidents happened. So again, it's worth, if you just sort of type his name in or type that paper in, you can have a read of it. But I've sort of made some summaries here of things that are not necessarily new, but it's useful when a piece of, peer-reviewed academic research confirms what maybe we know already. So the first thing is, okay, climbing experience, not a guarantee. Okay, well, that's no surprise, but it's just sort of useful to say that there's some research that is confirming that, it's not a beginner, have more incidents or accidents, you can be a very experienced climber. And again, this is sort of something Ray is going to be talking about in the afternoon about sort of interventions, maybe with long-standing climbers. And in this research, only 16% of the people who had these reported accidents were beginners. But then again, what he doesn't say in the paper is how many of the climbing walls customers were beginners. Yeah. So, the climbing walls customers may only had 10% beginners, in which case 16% is more. But it's still a low number, whichever way you look at it. Of relevance here is the idea that when it came to rope climbing sort of accidents, the most, frequent sort of activity, it was a belay mistake. Yeah. So almost half, basically 10 out of 23. So that confirms what we've got from the BMC database, which, as I said, is just user-generated research. This one here, to me, is really telling, and I just want to unpick this a little bit. So 3 out of those 10, the belayer was a beginner. But in 2 of those 3, the climber was a beginner too. So that, to me, is a sort of flag that is worth reflecting on, especially when you've got new adults, maybe beginner climbers who maybe do, a session and then a sort of, they then become as recreational climbers to a wall and they're sort of, set free. But if you have maybe 2 people who are both beginners, then, is there maybe the potential that their combined sort of knowledge is more limited than if you have a belayer climbing with somebody more experienced. So I think that's something that's really worth reflecting on. And, you know, you may have interventions in your wall in which, you know, someone's done an intro course and maybe a few weeks later they can just sort of, you know, have some sort of refresher. So, but if not, that's something that's worth reflecting on, because this research sort of, even though it's only very small numbers, you know, it's still, I think, worth reflecting on that sort of outcome that they found there, or that incident that they found there. But let's just put this in perspective. When you look at climbing compared to lots of other sports, you know, the general injury risk in climbing is low. You know, if you want to do something which has a high injury rate, and they usually measure it by, you know, per number of accidents or per 1,000 hours, you know, get on a horse, play rugby. You know, if you want to do something that has a high injury rate per 1,000 hours of activity, then, you know, climbing certainly is definitely right down sort of the low end of that spectrum. So that's a good thing. But at the same time, maybe people are complacent about the dangers that are present in indoor climbing. And one thing I sort of didn't mention is they did sort of categorize in the paper, you know, what they defined as an accident. And for them, it was when, let's say, a paramedic needs to turn up, or an ambulance. So we're talking about serious injury here. So, you know, somebody who maybe, you know, fell off, twisted their ankle, hobbled out the wall, and then sort of went home, they wouldn't be caught by their research, you know. But that's the issue of research. It's never perfect. But take homes here, again, just think about how people, you know, if you've got lots of beginners doing intro courses, especially if they're adults who are set free, then how do we sort of equip them to sort of make appropriate choices as they're carrying on in the climbing wall, or climbing outside for that case. So just a really quick thing about language. So we use common language in climbing for handholds, footholds, you know, undercuts, smear, edge, whatever. And it's worth, if you don't do this already, just trying to use, if we use consistent language across the industry, then it actually sort of makes it easier for ourselves to sort of have conversations about different types of belay device, and also helps our customers familiarize themselves with the different language. Now, this says braking device here, not belay device, because all of these things can be used for abseiling. So when you look at the standards for these things, they're called braking devices, but we don't need to get hung up about that. You know, we can call them belay devices as well. But basically there are two types. Hopefully none of this is new to you. On the left, these manual devices, and just about all of them now, which is only maybe over the last 10 years, are asymmetrical. They have grooves on one side and they're smooth on the other side. I think it's only the Black Diamond ATC that is a symmetrical device that you can still buy. So that's an interesting thing. The manufacturers are recognizing that grooves are a really good idea, so they just make all their manual devices with them, from what I can see. Then on the right-hand side, we have these assisted braking devices. On the far right, we've got a gree-gree. I'm sure everybody is familiar with that. And they're called mechanically assisted devices because they have moving parts, generally a cam, you know, with that's sort of held open with a spring, and when a force engages the cam, pinches the rope. Yeah. And then that middle one is where we're seeing a massive growth in the market these last 10 or so years, which are called geometry assisted devices. They have no moving parts, but the geometry of the device is such that when a force is applied, somebody falls off, they're being lowered, again, the rope is pinched in some way and then has to be sort of released manually by the belayer. But the clues in the words here, these are called assisted braking devices. Yeah, they're not locking devices or semi-locking devices. And using language such as that, I would say, is really unhelpful to customers, because it instills in them this idea that these things maybe have some kind of automatic function. And one of the reports in the near miss and incident database is of somebody witnessing a belayer using, and obviously a new climber, using a mechanically assisted device and not holding the dead rope, because he said, oh yeah, but you don't need to, you know, they do this. You know, he was wrong. You won't find any instructions for any climbing belayer device anywhere that says you can, you know, not hold a dead rope or brake rope, whatever you want to call it. You must always hold that rope. So that person was incorrect. And therefore, you know, who knows why he arrived at that conclusion, that beginner climber, but he did. And therefore the language you use is really important. So that's just sort of something for us all to sort of think about. And sort of moving on from that, when we are teaching belaying, then sort of a really good thing for multiple reasons is to consider what the manufacturers say. And I think reasons for doing this, first of all, then it's not like you saying it. So this isn't like, if I sort of describing, let's say, how to use a Grigori, it's not me, John Garside, saying this, or the BMC. Is I'm saying, well, this is what Pets will say, by the way. Pets will have amazing instructions, videos, pictograms, you name it. It's all out there, you know, showing people how to use their devices. You know, they're all over it, as are other manufacturers. So it really sort of helps. And I think it's also very useful to remember that whatever belay devices you're teaching people to use now, in 10 years' time, they're going to be very different, no doubt. There may be some common principles, but in instilling the behaviours in the people we teach, be they children, be they adults, to read the instructions, then that sort of is a really important thing for them to take forward. And like I say, if people don't like reading instructions, you know, watch a manufacturer's video. But this is from the instructions from DMM's instructions. And to me, you know, there's some very simple pictograms, and what to me those are saying are pull a little bit of rope through, so small hand movements, and then, you know, pull the brake hand down. So this is obviously hand movements, maybe when you're top roping, yeah? So that's why the rope is being pulled through the device. And then the image for when you are belaying a lead climber, again, the hands are near to the belay device. So, you know, take homes, again, as I say, for this, for me, are to read the manufacturer instructions, help your clients understand where they can find these instructions, maybe that part of your teaching of belaying, and you know, these sort of small hand movements. So I'm just going to sort of share a little film. So this is a film of me, and what I'm doing here is I am seeking to emulate the hand movements from that pictogram, yeah? Okay, so what I was doing, I had small hand movements, and I was pulling the rope away from my body. And the reason for that, what I was trying not to do was this. This is also from the same instructions from DMM. And obviously they're saying never let go of the brake hand. That's a big skull and crossbone red mark, but also don't have the ropes sort of parallel. And when, especially, it's not uncommon with beginners, they'll put a big load of rope through and have the ropes very parallel. And when we sort of think about, you know, a belay device, such as a manual device such as this, then they're inherently a compromise, aren't they? Because they need to be both slick so you can feed rope through, and they need to both lock the rope off so that you can hold a fall or lower someone down in a controlled manner. So that is an inherent kind of compromise in their design. And that's, you know, no one likes a judder clip, you know, when you're lead climbing, because you can't pull the rope through quickly enough. But if you are sort of pulling through a lot of rope, like sort of big hand movements, and, you know, sort of commonly with sort of a mnemonic that people sometimes use, VNE 1, 2, 3, then we are encouraging people to have sort of hand movements which will lead the ropes to be parallel. And, you know, if somebody sort of falls off with your sort of hand sort of right up high, you know, right up high above your head, then that's a very weak position for your hand. And it's going to be very, very hard, even for an experienced climber, you know, to hold the weight of somebody. So that to me is another reason to sort of think about these manufacturers' instructions, and to sort of think, in this case, about small hand movements. So I think a challenge, though, that we can have when we're teaching belaying is that, especially sometimes in an indoor wall with in situ ropes, because they need to be hard wearing and they can be quite stiff. Okay, that's nothing wrong there. It's very understandable why the ropes can be like that. And so that can sort of necessitate people, when they're top roping, to pull a great big load of rope through, you know, because they find it hard maybe to do small hand movements. So therefore, ways around this, maybe as much with children or with adults, is to maybe try and, if you're teaching belaying, try and introduce some variation. So try and get a less stiff rope on the top anchor so people can see the difference. So they can understand that if they're using the same belay device but change the rope, it's going to be a very different experience. And if they're already planning on coming to the wall and using those, in situ top ropes, then they might want to choose a belay device that allows a rope to run through them freely, so they can, have sort of small hand movements instead of pulling lots of rope through. However, if they're progressing climbing and go out and buy some skinny rope, they need to be aware that they may want to change their belay device because part of the system has changed, in that case, the rope. And climbing walls are obviously very low friction environments because the rope's just running through a top anchor. So I suppose the key message here for me, especially when we're thinking about this, trying to emulate manufacturer's instructions, trying to sort of work in the environment of climbing wall, is to sort of introduce some variation in your practice. And the easiest way to do that might, like I say, to have sort of, some ropes that are maybe stiffer and some ropes that are less stiff, when you're teaching belaying, so people can see the difference. So when they leave your care and they're going off being recreational climbers, finding their own way, they can remember that, and they're aware that if they sort of change one bit of the system, then they maybe need to sort of, in that case, the rope, maybe need to change the belay device as well. And it's a bit like climbers, isn't it? Some people say, oh, I don't like climbing on grit, I much prefer this type of rock. But as we all know, the best climbers are good on granite, slate, limestone, sandstone, whatever, because they climb on all these different types of rocks. They have variation in their practice and they become experts, whatever the situation. And it should be the same for belaying, because, it's a very variable kind of activity when you sort of change one part of the system. So what I've got now is a little video. And actually, what I'm going to do, I'm just sort of go back a slide, because what I meant to do before we do this video, so I'm going to go back a slide, is I'm going to ask Rob to put this first poll out. I should have done it earlier, but it doesn't really matter. I'll just sort of go back. And all it is just back to this slide here. And just if you put the poll up, Rob, and it's asking you which of these devices have you taught the use of. You can tick one or all of the answers, and you may have only taught, you may mainly teach on, let's say, manual device, and you occasionally teach on the other ones. If you've ever taught just once on it, be that a friend, be that in a class, it doesn't really matter. Just sort of interested to know what experience there is out there of people teaching the use of these different types of device. Okay.
Yeah, the poll's live, guys. It should just pop up on your screen. If everybody could answer it, that would be fantastic. I mean, I say that we're already at 72%. You guys are on it. This is awesome.
Okay,
guys.
So I'm just going to go forward to the next slide, and then in a minute, I'll ask Rob to close that. Okay. So Rob, do you want to maybe close the poll and share the results with everybody?
Okay. Yeah, if you haven't already voted, you've lost your chance. There we go. I closed it. And here's the results.
That is incredibly encouraging, actually, that you are all massively experienced in, teaching across all three devices, and long may that continue, because, and hopefully, when you're teaching, especially I'd sort of say adults who may have sort of less formal teaching sometimes, then do consider trying to make them aware of all the different devices. Okay, so let us move on. Okay, so this next film, which I'm going to share, is actually, it sort of ties in a bit with what Ray is going to talk about later. So let me just press play. And at the end of it, I'm going to ask you to complete another poll. And I'll play it a few times. It's quite short. All I want to do is just look at the quality of this belaying and just make an assessment of it. So I'll play it a couple of times. So just have a focus on his hand movements. That's all we're really interested in, I would suggest. Okay, let's play it once more. Like I say, it's not very long. So here we go. Okay, so Rob, could you share the next poll? And this is a single choice. You've got one of 3 options to choose here. So if you saw that belaying at your wall, what would you do or not do?
There we go. Voting is live. Go for it, everybody.
There's no right or wrong answers. This whole point, it's about opinion. Yeah, you're on the coalface, so to speak. These are your customers.
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking this from a floor walking perspective. Yeah, you know, if you obviously here, or you know, just sort of you see this. How many people have answered so far, Rob?
75% of people have answered.
Okay, so we'll just give it a...
Almost there.
Yeah, we'll just give it maybe another 30 seconds. If you could answer this.
If anybody here is having issues in answering any of the polls, if they're not working for you, leave us a comment in the chat function or the question and answer with your answer to the poll. If the poll's not working for you, you can leave us a comment.
Shall we close the poll, Rob, and share the results?
Let's do it. There was a comment came in there, John. The option doesn't include tail his rope and then speak to them.
Okay, so maybe, I guess that's the second one then, isn't it? It's about speaking to him as opposed to... Fair enough, yeah, a very good point.
So here's the results, and I think everybody's kind of in the same boat here. Most people are in the same boat.
Yeah, well, it's good to see... I think it's good to see that no one clicked, I think the belaying is fine. I mean, there seemed to be some poor sort of hand movements when he was swapping his hands on the dead rope. The hand sort of hovering up high, not down low for extended periods. Pulling lots of rope through the device were sort of the 3 main things I noticed. But I mean, I tend to agree. But also stepping in immediately, that's, you know, there's no harm doing that as well. So great, okay. But this also feeds on to Rob's. And I suppose what I sort of, the good thing from those results is no one said like do nothing, i.e., you know, something needs to be done here to help. Okay. And by the way, this belayer, so a colleague of mine who does some site-specific training at a school wall. So he did the training. He goes back a year later to revalidate, you know, and this is a teacher, he's filming him. And he sort of did it and, you know, showed the teacher the film. And the teacher was sort of quite, no, not mortified, but I thought, crikey, you know, I thought I was belaying good, but I can see I've sort of forgotten the things that my colleague had told him. And I suppose, again, another really good sort of, you know, teaching thing, and maybe especially with kids in NICAS, if a kid is filmed on his or her own phone, so you don't maybe have issues, and I guess maybe you need permission from parents, etc. But, you know, if you get people to film each other, like groups of 3 climbing and somebody's filming the belayer, then it's a way of instant feedback, isn't it? It's a way of thinking, okay, I didn't, you know, to sort of help people sort of understand, you know, what their belaying looks like, yeah? So it's just, again, another sort of thing to take away, you know, when you're teaching to maybe consider adding, maybe you already do this. It's very common in climbing movement, isn't it? And there's no harm in doing the same thing in belaying. Okay, let's go on. All right. So, great. Okay, on to the next slide. Good. So just got two sort of slides here. And this is really thinking about, I would say, hand movements. So if you look at the device, like the device being used back then in that last film, the Grigri, then actually, if the hand is actually up high, then the cam will actually engage in the case of a fall. Yeah. So the point being is that basically the assisted braking function of a device such as a gree or any other mechanically assisted braking device is independent of the braking hand position. Yeah. So if you're really, really sloppy with a mechanically assisted braking device, not that we should encourage that behavior, then it should still engage. Whereas when you look at the geometry assisted braking device, we've got a Megadual there, we've got Mammoth Smart, the Black Diamond one, whose name I always forget for some bizarre reason. There's also the Click Up. Pilot, thank you. Then in that case, the assisted braking function is dependent on the braking hand position. So if you use any of those devices and had that braking hand up high, then the assisted braking function would not engage. Yeah, just as with a manual braking device. So, there's a very kind of simple take home here. Hopefully it's pretty obvious. Just teach the same hand movements and it will work for every belay device. Yeah. So if that teacher, he didn't, his hand hovering up high sometimes, pulling through lots of rope. If you just sort of teach, put a little bit of rope through, keep the hand low, it'll work for every device. And obviously never let go of the brake hand device. So it's quite a simple sort of, message, and hopefully really not teaching you to suck eggs here, but it's just sort of worth remembering it. And I think sometimes it can be useful to consider, if you like, these sort of concepts that maybe help people, have lots of different things in your arsenal. So I quite like this one. If we imagine, like, don't have to call it the device line, call it what you want, but an imaginary line that, probably pokes out at the bottom of your rib cage, across the top of the belay device, then trying to tell our customers we're teaching, just always try and have your hand below the device line. Like whenever your hand is above it, you're like in not the danger zone. That's a bit kind of, but you are sort of potentially disengaging the device. Well, you are disengaging the device. So helping people to maybe consider that as a concept, or call it what you want, but that can also sort of help people. It's called an extrinsic factor because it's something that's external from them and can be quite visually a kind of a strong way of coaching technique, whatever the sort of the technique you're trying to coach. And teaching someone to belaying, coaching someone to belaying is basically the same thing. We are coaching them in a technique, in this case, belaying. So you may find that a useful concept to take away, to with your clients, to sort of think about that as a teaching aid. Okay, so this is sort of a quite hot topic. I've sort of seen a few articles. Well, I certainly saw one article in UKC about this, and also you sort of hear people talking about it. What's interesting, so DAV is the German Alpine Club, equivalent to the BMC in Germany, and they own climbing walls. Yeah, so they can actually investigate their own statistics from climbing walls much more sort of easily, if you like, because they own a number of walls. They have all the stats. Anyway, so what their sort of research has shown is that it's basically human error. So you can't sort of suggest that even though in Germany, what DAV did, they sort of instigated this suggestion that people should use assisted braking devices when they are sport climbing or climbing in a wall over a manual device. Yeah. So they did this, but when they sort of looked a few years later, and sort of the incidents and accidents linked to different types of belay devices after this intervention was made, then they couldn't arrive at a conclusion that the assisted braking devices had made the belaying safer. So really, the conclusion here is just focus on the belay behaviours. My personal choice, yes, when I go sport climbing, I prefer to be belayed on an assisted braking device. So that's my personal preference. But I'm also very aware, and even more aware, as who belays me, because I've seen plenty of people belay atrociously with a gree. So, and I wouldn't want them climbing with me. I just prefer to just go for a walk or go bouldering, you know what I mean? So, it's about the climber making a choice, himself, herself, as to who you want belaying, So I would suggest not falling in, not a trap, but the assumption that a certain type of belay device is safer. What makes belaying safer are good belay behaviours, period, full stop, I would suggest. So I just want to sort of dwell a little bit this is taken from the BMC, Belaying and Abseiling leaflet, which has been in print for a long time. You can download it from the BMC website, or if you want copies, I can post them to you. And there are 2 pages here. You can see it's actually quite old. We need to update it because it's got a DMM bug on the left-hand side, and that device isn't even made anymore. But the message is really the same. So when we are trying to think about the type of belay device, and there are lots of different things we want to consider. There's design and function of it. We've already covered that. And there are all those things, you know, they're more than just that. But these are kind of, I'd say, sort of 3 top things, like the characteristics or experience of the climber and belayer, you know, rope design, especially rope diameter. You know, a skinny rope is going to go through belay device more easily. And the style of climbing, I think this is really appropriate to climb walls, and also sport climbing, probably definitely the most climbing walls, because climbing walls are probably the least friction environment. You know, all the quick draws are a nice straight line up to the top, very little friction created by the system. Compare that to, you know, when you get trad climbing and don't extend things properly and you can hardly pull the rope through. So the style of climbing can either introduce lots of friction or have very little friction in the system. So there's little friction in the whole system. It's all kind of down to the belayer to sort of manage any forces that might be applied, you know, as a climber falls off, etc. But let's sort of think about how, you know, you could, you know, you can use this leaflet, so I can send you copies, or you can download it, or just sort of this way of thinking when we are teaching people. Then let's imagine a few different situations. So an example 1 might be a child belayer, like a 14-year-old, you know, who could belay independently in many climbing walls. Then you might actually want to have a skinny rope for them, because it might be easier for them to pull the rope through when they're both climbing and when they're belaying, because it's not so big in their hand. But therefore, you may also want a small belay device, and there are some available. I found 2. There's the Alpine Guide and the Megajoule, which I think one of them says you shouldn't use a rope that's wider than 9 millimeters. So they could be, you know, so yeah, in that case, you know, you've got somebody for whom a skinny rope might be appropriate. It's also very good for children if they're taking leader falls, obviously, because the skinnier the rope, the lower the impact force when they take a fall. And none of us like to have a harsh fall. So just by having a skinny rope with a low impact force creates a much nicer fall for a child if they are, or a light adult if they are taking a leader fall, especially if the belayer is a lot heavier. But, you know, you could sort of match up in that way. Another example might be a weight difference. An obvious thing here I would say to use is the Edelrid Ohm. And I'm not just sort of saying that because I like Edelrid, but no one else makes that device. And I think it's a massive game changer in trying to manage weight difference. Because my personal opinion is, I think sandbags, having used them myself, are not very heavy. I find quite problematic because they're not really, they just sort of make you heavier, but they don't necessarily address the issue of the weight difference when it comes to the actual force that's impacting your body. Certainly when I've used them on people a lot heavier than me, you know, actually I just am worried actually about getting injured because it just sort of pulls my body in half. So, but there are other ways in which we can manage weight difference, and the Ohm is one of them. I've got a little film about the Ohm in a bit. And then what other sort of clients might we have? What about, let's say, partially sighted clients? And the reason I bring them up is I was told that the ClickUp, which maybe some of you are aware of, was designed with partially sighted climbers in mind. It's an Italian design by Climbing Technology, and it has an audible click for those of you who've used it, hence the name. So if you're partially sighted, you know, you've got an auditory cue as to when the device is engaged. So that might be, you know, an appropriate device for a certain type of audience. And also the ClickUp, for those of you who've used it, unlike, let's say, a Gree, which has this lever and can be quite fine motor control, the ClickUp you sort of hold in your whole hand. You're using much bigger muscle groups when you come to release the ClickUp. So again, that can be advantageous for people who maybe have fine motor control problems. That might suggest why they belay in the first place. But that aside, you know, different belay devices work in very different ways and can be really appropriate for certain groups. So when we're teaching belaying, you know, we all have our probably favorite device and we don't like other devices. And often when I've sort of investigated it myself, it's just because I haven't read the instructions, quite frankly. And once I read the instructions, I realize it just works differently to other devices. And it's just my own kind of prejudice often. But therefore, I would sort of suggest when we're teaching belaying, you know, and climbing generally, obviously, you know, try and get customers to be inquisitive. so that, you know, a few years later, when they're suddenly going to be, they've graduated, not graduated, they, let's say, moved on from indoors and they're climbing outdoors as well as indoors, then they realize, oh, remember that sort of lesson we had back 5 years ago? Okay, I need to sort of think about things differently here because the environment's different. So we can empower people to make those choices and sort of help them so that as they're developing in their climbing career, you know, the behaviours that you instill in them at the beginning, they can sort of take forward to lots of different situations. Maybe they become a parent and they climb with their own kid and they remember, oh, I should buy a skinny rope now, whatever, or maybe they don't want to do that. You know, it's about them having the ability to make those decisions. So that's like a take home from that, really. Let's leave our own prejudices and preferences aside and sort of think about how we help our customers, you know, think about what device might work for them best. And then one thing that, I mean, I can say this myself, when I used to teach belaying, we often don't teach this element of it, which is, you know, the falling off part, okay? Because, you know, all these things are facts, I would say. Climbers fall off without warning. Yeah, I mean, that happens. Therefore, you've got to hold falls without thinking, like your emergency brake when you're in your car, yeah? So I would suggest, therefore, you need lots of safe practice. A really good way of achieving that we're going to look at now is about drills. So how can we achieve people to have sort of good behaviours for holding a fall without that happening? So we don't train holding a fall by throwing people through the air. Yeah, I would suggest we can train people holding a fall using ground-based drills. And I think we can use ground-based drills across all of climbing movement. There are so many more, you know, sort of ways in which we can develop a whole range of climbing skills without sort of even getting on the climbing wall. Yeah, it's very common in all sports. Maybe some of you, I'm sure, have done lots of other sports. Drills are just like bread and butter in lots of sports. And, you know, we can embrace that kind of way of teaching as well. Because ultimately, you know, if you're going to sort of let someone loose, as it were, to sort of be a sort of responsible recreational climber in a wall, then it's like, can they do that? You know, when somebody falls off, will they be able to react automatically when necessary? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is show another short film. And just before I press play, the way in which it is set up, you may have done this yourselves. The important thing here is, and you'll see it a bit when it comes in shot, the rope is going through a pulley wheel on the second bolt there, and the belayer, in this case this woman, they're on a slightly overhanging part of the climbing wall, and the person behind, in this case that coach, she can't see him. So at some point, you know, she's going to experience a force as he pulls the rope hard. But importantly, there's even less friction in the system as normal because there's a pulley wheel up there. And that's kind of actually key to making this work. And obviously it's on an overhanging wall so that she doesn't like slam into a slab. So I'll play it a couple of times. Yeah, I realize you might not be able to see the pulley wheel very easily, but that doesn't really matter. It's up there. So this is paying the rope out as if lead climbing. Obviously, you could do it with bottom roping. And when I've sort of done this, I've actually done it with adults, then, I mean, that took maybe 10 seconds simulating a leader fall. So imagine you did this for like half an hour with some groups. I mean, crikey, the amount of sort of simulated leader falls you could have, and also you can change it. You know, you can, right, let's use this different device. Or, you know, you set up a thicker rope and a skinnier rope and people swap around. You know, you can just get masses of variation in your practice. And no one leaves the ground. It's actually quite a lot of fun. You've got to sort of be careful people don't get too boisterous and, you know, pull people up, obviously, because that just adds different kind of risk into the system. But this was actually sort of demonstrated by a French coach at a sort of a seminar that one of my colleagues attended. And he was talking about doing this with children, you know, and he said after about 100 goes, you know, they were getting really good, you know, so you need to drill things a lot so that people get good at it. And importantly, until they sort of realize what kind of force they're going to experience if somebody falls off, then they don't know what to expect. So surely it's only, it's only sort of right and proper. We really help people sort of understand the level of force they may experience when holding a leader fall. Yeah. So we'd sort of, suggest, thinking about exploring that. And like I say, importantly, have a pulley wheel and definitely have it such that the belay, cannot see the person pulling the rope. It needs to be realistic. And the good thing is, if people fail, then that in a way is a good thing, because people can understand why they failed. You're like, why didn't you hold the fall? What went wrong? Yeah. So it's a really good way, and hopefully people will get more confident as well about climbing, in a partnership, if they sort of realize that they can actually hold falls for each other. Okay. And then just sort of home straight here, just a few final things. And maybe, just sort of things to think about. There's a whole variety of specialist equipment. Belay glasses, I certainly use those because they seem cheaper than going to the osteopath when my neck hurts. And also, I just can't, if I'm belaying a lead climber, I just can't look at them all the time if I don't use those, because I can't hold my head up all the time. So to me, if I want to really pay attention, then, there's sort of a necessity for me. Also, gloves. So in pictograms, when you look at pictograms for belay devices, especially manual devices, people seem to be wearing gloves. I'm not saying people should wear gloves, but it's just sort of interesting, that subliminal messaging there. Personally, I wear gloves. It just seems to protect my hands. It's personal choice. But again, these are sort of things, to sort of think about and consider. People may ask you questions, have an opinion yourselves. And then just going to look at the Edelrid Ohm here, sort of a final bit of specialist equipment. And if you look at the film on Edelrid, then it's sort of shown as a thing for belaying a lead climber and mitigating the sort of weight difference there. And you need a weight difference of at least 10 kilograms and not more than 40 kilograms is what Edelrid say. But here it's used in quite a nice different situation. I filmed this on a climbing wall instructor training course. I was quality assuring for mountain training. And what they did here, they set it up. So bottom rope, top rope, bottom rope, whatever you want to call it. And heavier climber, the belayer was lighter, you can't see her. And they put the Edelrid Ohm on the adjacent line so that, first of all, it took the force out when he got to be lowered, but also, he wasn't being lowered onto the belayer's head, which is often another problem when you have, a heavy climber and a light belayer. When they hit the ground, they all get tangled up, suddenly like the lead climber, the person on the rope is sort of landing on their head because the belayer just isn't heavy enough to get out of the way. So by doing it in this way, you sort of solve that, and you can see the ohm engaging there. For those of you who haven't used ohms, they're just a cleat, so they don't stop the rope, they just take a lot of the force out. So you can always lower somebody. No one's ever going to be just left hanging in the air. Obviously, maybe not always possible at a busy wall, in your Saturday NICAS club, all the lines being used. But, every wall has quiet times, and maybe, an appropriate way of sort of helping people manage weight risk and thinking about doing it in a more pleasant way. So that's that. Okay, let's move on. So just got a sort of a final thing, and apologies for anybody who maybe, these are all in the public domain, these examples. And apologies to anybody who may have witnessed any of these incidents or know people involved. But we've been talking a lot, obviously, about belayer behaviours, and, poor belaying has undoubtedly sort of led to some really quite frightening near misses where no one's get injured, some kind of relatively minor injuries, such as, bad rope burns, but also injuries where people have had life-changing incidents, such as you might find there's an incident that happened in the northeast. I can't remember which wall it was. A young man, student, dropped from the top of a wall, ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. So you can have sort of serious outcomes if you get dropped from the top of a climbing wall. These are sort of very sadly fatalities that have happened on climbing walls, and most of them, well, almost all of them, when rope climbing, would appear to be people not completing their knot properly, and there's one auto belay fatality as well. And I think that, therefore, maybe the most important behaviours that we instill on climbers when we're teaching them is always do a partner check, just sort of every time, you know, every time, like, you know, okay, in some NICAS club, maybe the kids are like changing ropes, you know, 20, 30 times, I don't know, in a session, but it's like every time you do a partner check, it's just because one time it could save your life. It's kind of that simple. So, and it's so quick. And there's a really good actual Petzl film with Julia Chanody in it, in which he goes through a sort of a partner check. When you sort of see it at the end, you know, it's like a 10-second check, you know, it just gets into you and you're doing it properly. So I would say that's like a really important behavior to instill. And it's sort of obviously linked to belaying. So we're just sort of getting almost to the very end now, and maybe just take a minute to reflect. When you are teaching belaying, what are maybe the top 3 behaviors that you might focus on? Maybe just write them down now, or just sort of think them in your head. Just give you a minute or so to have a think about that, and then I'll share you my top 3.
Feel free to stick your top 3 in the chat function.
Great idea. Yeah, please do. Okay, so I'll just show you my sort of top 3. First one is hopefully not a surprise. It's just that last slide. So if we, you know, going back to the very beginning, you want people to come back, have a great time, and climb safely. So the last thing we want people to do is to have a fatality, yeah? And it would seem that, you know, if people just partner checked all the time, then that may go to mitigating that risk, you know, not being attached to your rope. So that's my most important belay behavior, even though you could argue it's not belaying, fair enough. And then the second thing is this system awareness. You know, there's a rope, there's a carabiner, there's a belay device, there's the style of climbing, there's the different weights of climbers, there's a different experience, you know, the list goes on and on and on and on. And you change any one of those variables, then the whole system, you know, the belaying device may not work as someone expected it if they've only been introduced with a limited sort of degree of variation, like always the same type of rope, always the same type of belay device. Yeah, so helping people understand that you change one thing, then everything could change. Yeah, you know, driving on a sunny day on a dry road in summer like now, it's very different to driving on the motorway in snow. Yeah, you've changed something, therefore the whole thing has changed, and you need to behave appropriately. So no difference with belaying. And then sort of finally, belay hand movements in line with manufacturer's instructions. And to me, it's quite simple. Small hand movements, keep the brake hand low. I mean, never let go of the dead rope. I mean, it's not actually very complicated when you sort of think about it. So really helping people to understand like universal belay hand movements that can be transferred to any kind of belay device and will work. Okay, and then I'm just going to finish with a little film. So the BMC, Climb Scotland, Mountaineering Ireland, ABC, and Mountain Training. I mean, I work for both BMC and Mountain Training. So in a way, sort of staff, you know, from all those organisations are here today, and we've been here all this year, and we're going to be doing more of these as well in the future, sharing our knowledge. And I suppose this sort of, we've been talking about this a lot, myself, Rob, Scott, Damien, and others. That and maybe you've experienced this, you know, if one thing this pandemic has brought us is sort of realizing more effective ways of working in a kind of really time efficient way. And one thing that's sort of come out of it is a whole range of films. And I'm going to sort of show you this little film. And there's where is it? How do I? There we go. So this is like the phone friendly film. So it's part of the Be a Better Climber campaign that all those partner organisations have been involved in. And there's a whole series of films that the various organisations have been sharing. And what I'm going to do now in a minute is just ask Rob to share a poll. But regarding what you might do with your clients, then, there are phone-friendly films, you can sort of share them with them. And, I'm showing these films. There's one about belaying there. There's one about partner checks. There's one about bouldering. And there's one about using auto belays. Yeah. So if you want to sort of share the, poll, Robbie, and it's a simple question. So are you aware of it? I'm not saying have you ever used it, but are you aware that this is going on? It was launched in April.
Yeah. There is audio to those videos as well. I'm not sure if the audio was coming through on anybody else's.
No, I just got rid of all the audio on all mine. There is audio, exactly as Robbie said.
Nearly everybody's voted already. Awesome, guys. You are on it today. Much more awake on a Tuesday morning.
Do you want to, sort the results for that?
So yeah, we've got 80%. 80% of people have already voted. I think that's kind of what our max was before. I'll give it 10 more seconds and then I'll show you guys the results.
Brilliant.
And right, if you haven't voted already, now's your last chance. 3, 2, 1. There we go.
Okay, so at least more people have heard of them than haven't heard of them. But it's very useful sort of research for all the partners here today to know that, there's still like some of you haven't heard of them. So that's useful information.
Just a note there, it's not something that we can do on the polls, but if you haven't seen these videos already or you haven't got access to them, leave us a message in the question and answer or in the chat function, and we'll take a note of your details and we'll make sure we send you links over.
Yeah, exactly. And if you certainly on our website, or you can just email me, or it's actually Emma at the BMC, but you can email me. But there's a page on our website where all the films are, and anybody who wants, there's a Dropbox, all the toolkit in, so all the films are there, the images, so the different formats for mobile friendly, for YouTube friendly, and all that kind of stuff. So exactly as Rob said, we can share those with you. But again, just useful films. You can show them in situ with your clients, thinking about teaching belaying. So. Okay, so hopefully you understand that, and I'm sure you already did anyway, but we've got different types, and let's use common language, different factors. We've talked quite a lot about that. And I guess the last one, I hope you learned some new ideas. And if you've got obviously any other ideas, you think, oh, crikey, why aren't they saying this? This is like an amazing idea. He's missing a trick here, etc. Then yeah, just put it in the chat. And when we sort of have Q&A on this, we can discuss it there as well. Okay, so that is me.
Perfect. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. That was awesome. Can I have all of my other panelists switch their videos back on and join us? We're going to have a little question and answer session. So yeah, we've had a couple of questions come in already, but I hope that you are all sitting there furiously typing, getting some questions into us. Like I said, be brutal, ask some really in-depth stuff. I'm sure John's going to be able to answer them. And we've got a few more experienced people here. We can definitely answer some of the questions. But while we're waiting on questions coming in, I've actually, on something that John was talking about there, I've got a question for all of you out there. He was talking about the ohm. And I'm aware that, I use the ohm a lot, and I still get people asking me what this is, what it does, how it works. So is it something that you guys use? Is it something that you use in climbing walls? Do you use it only for lead climbing, or have you tried using it for top roping? If you have, or if you've used it and you know how it works and everything, or you've used it for top ropes, let us know in the comments. It'd be just really interesting to see who out there is currently using them in climbing walls for instructing. And yeah, one more thing that John mentioned was the ground-based skills, using that pulley to teach belaying, to teach how to catch falls. Again, it'd be really interesting to see who out there is already using this practice or who's new to it. So yeah, let us know. Leave us a comment in the chat or the question and answer, and we'll see. Yeah, it'd be interesting for us to see. How was that for you guys? Did you guys enjoy John's presentation? I did. Grant, so first question that came in was, it's too common, it's more of a statement more than a question, but I'll ask a question afterwards. It's too common that a gree-gree or the likes of, so an assisted braking device, is seen as 100% safe. I'm sure we've all heard this, auto lock statement. And people getting into a false sense of security and that nothing can go wrong. We obviously know that that is false. These aren't auto locking devices. They're not 100% safe. You still need to hold the dead rope. You still need to be on it. But how do you think we, as representatives from the national governing body, how can all of our attendees here as instructors or climbers tackle this issue of the perception that these devices are 100% safe?
Say read the manufacturer's instructions. So does a manufacturer say, how do they tell you how to use it? And you won't find any manufacturer that says don't hold the brake rope. So therefore it is depoliticizing the whole conversation. It's not you as the instructor in your climbing wall. It's not the ABC. It's not one of the mountaineering councils. So that I would say is a sort of a first step, and Raymond's going to talk about this later, about how we sort of engage with people, because that's often the hardest, isn't it? Because people, can get quite bristly. But that's where I would suggest you start. And also you may therefore introduce also the language. They don't describe them in that way. They're describing as assisted braking. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add, but that's my take.
Any comments from Ireland?
Yeah, just a thing on, it's kind of come up recently with the braking assisted automatic stuff. It's like the new modern cars, the driver assisted cars. So you can kind of use that as an example to somebody. So yeah, you're sitting in there, your fancy new Merc's got driver assist, but that doesn't mean you can fall asleep and take your hands fully off. So you can kind of tie it into, kind of a modern, more, like it's out there for people. So, we know and hear about driver assisted cars. Doesn't mean it's automatic driving. So yeah, kind of tying it into something a bit more practical that people might know about as well.
Yeah.
I think also people sometimes take their hands off because they say, oh, well, it's always worked for me. It's like, okay, and there are plenty of examples when it doesn't work. And also they're not designed to be used in that way. So your own personal experience is kind of exactly what Damien's saying. Well, I just let go of the steering wheel. I haven't crashed yet. Well, doesn't mean you won't,
I think just to echo what John just said about experience, if you're coaching somebody, put them on something that they don't like. An example that I've done in teenage NICAS sessions is, okay, we're going to learn how to pay out with the rope. Oh, can I have a friction? Sorry, not a friction device. I'm going to try and use your language, John. But I'd force them to use a gree-gree and make them learn to use a gree-gree to pay out. They don't like it, but the experience is the key, I think, there. And having people experience it, though they can form their own opinion on, oh, I don't like it, I do like it, I'll choose this, I won't choose this. And it's just them kind of coming to a conclusion about what it is that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and there's another couple of comments coming in here about, confusion of some people saying that the guidance says that we can keep the cam on the gree-gree disabled the whole time, holding it closed the whole time. Just going to mirror exactly what John said. All of this advice is in the manufacturer's guidance. It tells you exactly how to use these devices, what they are, what their function is, and especially what not to do with them. And for gree-grees especially, I know fine well that in the guidance it states not to hold the cam down the whole time. In all of assisted braking devices information packets, it says never to let go of the dead rope. So yeah, I'm just going to mirror what John said. I think it's a really important thing for us as governing body or instructors in climbing walls. When you see someone buying a new device, try and get them to read the guidance that's there, or at least go and look at some of the videos that the manufacturer have put out. So there was a question kind of came in that, should we be teaching, the basic belaying method with just a manual device, or with newbies, should we be teaching them with just an assisted device, or should we be actively trying to teach using a mix to allow people, give them a broad knowledge of what devices are out there and potentially allow them to choose what one fits them best?
I think in all coaching, variation is the way to go. So if all you ever climb on is slabs, you'll be a very good slab climber. Same with belaying, so yes, have as much variation in your practice, and that might be different types of manual device, or it might be the same manual device but changing the rope diameter. Whatever variation you can introduce from the equipment you might have at your climbing wall, seek to use that so that people understand that when you change something, everything changes, and then that's the principle they can hopefully take away when they leave your charge.
How about you, Raymond? What happens in your centre with instructors? Do you guys generally just use the one type of device, or do you try and use a mix?
So each coach has a mixture of belay plates and gree-grees. It depends on, because they have to kind of run various sessions. Depending on the coach, ideally they would, I guess, teach on a gree-gree in the beginning, just if it's somebody that's new to the activity, but still underpin, not letting go of the dead rope. Good practices of belaying, and then kind of graduate up to various belay devices. It just depends on what they have on their kit, because it's like 20 or so active coaches. There's only so much kit that can go around, but there's nothing that a coach can't go up to another one and say, can I borrow your click up? I want to teach Johnny here. Can I borrow your old ATC, because I want them to feel how slick the rope is when lowering this really light climber or this really heavy climber. It depends on the coach and what they need to kind of teach their belayer. So it's possible for multitudes of kind of experience to be given. It just depends on time constraints, I guess, and equipment, of course, equipment.
Yeah. Any comments from you guys, Scott, Damien? No. Cool. Sorry, I'm just keeping track of all the questions that's coming in. There's loads of them coming in all at the same time here. You guys are keeping me on my toes. This is something that we'll potentially touch on in Raymond's presentation later on, and if it is, Raymond, feel free to let us know, but worth bringing up here anyway. What is the best way to deal with an instructor who has been qualified for a while, who's come into your climbing centre, whose belaying is less than appropriate? I like the term less than appropriate. Having the badge being flashed as the example, I am an SPA, my belaying is right, that can be a really difficult conversation to have. So how should we kind of go about these conversations?
Challenge them. I've got a good example here. A friend of mine in North Wales was talking about, and this is no criticism of the wall, by the way, actually it doesn't matter, it's a wall in North Wales, and a lot of outdoor professionals live in North Wales, and he's an outdoor professional himself, and he was at the climbing wall, and there are winter mountaineering climbing instructors, mountain guides, just belaying sloppily, not paying attention, just sort of being really casual. Yeah. And that's just kind of really, really poor, isn't it? They're professionals. They should be like, being the best. Yeah. Because if the professionals are displaying poor practice, then what hope do we have in trying to help recreational climbers develop good behaviours? Yeah. You hopefully wouldn't see a driving instructor driving along on their phone, drinking beer, in the fast lane of the M6 with their knees on the steering wheel. So similarly with that. So So yes, I mean, I think it's really unfortunate when that happens, because often, you know, floor walkers are often younger people, and you know, it can be very difficult, challenging, like, you know, a 50-year-old mountain guide. But hey, you know, it's a managed sports facility. If they're not doing it very well, then they should be challenged. And I think it's about, yeah, training and how to have those conversations. But you know, it's not really good. I wouldn't, you know, I've got qualifications. Doesn't mean I can't make mistakes, be challenged. I should be open to that.
Yes, no, absolutely. And this is something that we came across. This was something we chatted about quite a lot, actually, in the floor walking webinar with, you know, you guys working as instructors in climbing walls. You've had either site-specific training or you've got the qualifications. You guys, you know, you've got the knowledge and the power to be able to question people when you see their practices as not being appropriate. And even if those conversations don't go well, that's okay. You know, it's good to start having these conversations. You know, pulling people up for practices that they're doing that you don't think are appropriate in your center, pulling them up and starting the conversations is a really, really positive thing. If it doesn't go well, that's what your manager is there for. You know, we discussed before about instructors having conversations with people and those conversations going negatively. Taking someone's details, escalating it to a manager and letting the manager get in contact with them. We had examples before where, you know, conversations have got quite aggressive. You know, floor walkers have been met with a bit of aggro because, you know, people are getting pulled up for things. But escalating it to a manager allows people the time to kind of calm down a little bit and not feel so, I suppose, attacked. You know, but, you know, having these conversations is a really, really important thing to do, and have, you know, trust in your own knowledge and your own experience to say that I've recognized something's not right here, and I'm going to have the conversation, no matter where it ends up going. I think it's a really positive thing. Is this something you have come across in Westway, Raymond?
Yeah, personally, it's when I first started. I'll touch on this when I present, but you shouldn't be afraid to say, "Hey, I saw you do this. Did you know?" And if they get defensive about it, I think again, it's tough to not take it personally, because you're doing something that you're employed to do, and you have a duty of care, especially if you're a duty manager. Not that everything is going to turn out to be the end of the world if they do it again. But again, highlighting, making a person aware of their poor behavior, maybe even poor attitudes, is something that shouldn't be kind of shied away from, despite how uncomfortable it might be. And, you know, I've been there myself, where I've had to speak to somebody, it's not gone well, and that's at the beginning of the shift, and so you have to pass this person every time, and, you know, they might be shooting dagger stares at you, and, you know, they do it again, and you have to go over again, and you have a back and forth, and it just becomes quite uncomfortable for everybody. But yes, despite what qualifications they may have, and how untouchable they may feel, it's not right that they behave like that, like what John said. I'll share what happened quite recently at the Westway. There was a gentleman he's an IRATA level 3. If people know what IRATA is, that's the rope, the industry rope access qualification, and 3 is quite high in terms of that qualification. There's a lot of hours spent being a level 1, being a level 2 to obtain level 3, and so on. But he was behaving horrendously, completely horrendously. So he was setting a wall, and they cordoned off the area, but still, it's this visual of behavior. So they were kind of setting holds, but then he didn't like the holds, and then he would just kind of dive vomit from, let's say, 5 meters up on the wall, and it would slam into the ground. And that itself isn't acceptable. When they were testing, he was anchored down, but he was belaying too climbers at the same time on top rope. And then kind of, if everybody can see me, he was doing this. So both hands was, he was like this. Yeah, go on, mate, go on. Yeah, no. And like John said, it's just a behavior that isn't acceptable, because if other people are seeing it, what message does it send? And we kind of had a little chat about it in the team, and he was saying that he could probably justify from his experience, oh, it's okay because of this. Oh, I've done it. It's all right, mate. No, calm down. It's not as bad as it seems. Whereas, a lot of us were like, just no, this isn't right. So I believe we kicked it up to the management, like you've said, John, and the head of the climb wall had a good chat with this guy, and I think somebody else who was in charge, in addition to him doing the route setting. So don't be afraid, but try not to take it personal, and not make it personal as well, I think is the best thing I can say.
Yeah, exactly.
I chatted to somebody who witnessed a serious accident at a wall, a belaying accident, and he got PTSD for every year, couldn't go to a climbing wall. So I think that it's the wider impact. And I remember speaking to somebody who runs a wall, and they had not as serious accident as that, but it affects staff as well. So I think that there are lots of reasons why the primary reason you don't want an accident is people get hurt, but there's a much wider ripple effects that it's just unacceptable. It's like, just don't let me in your wall eventually. Crikey, just sorry, you're not welcome, mate. It's just not really good.
Yeah, but that's a decision for your manager, to make. Feel free, absolutely feel free to tackle these things. Start the conversation, start the discussion, and if it doesn't go well, escalate to your manager, and they can make the decision on what happens. They may insist that they do whatever instructor does it this way, or they just say, if you're not going to play by our rules, that's it. Because at the end of the day, climbing wall staff, you guys, and floor walkers and managers, you guys are there to make sure that the users of your center are doing it safely in a way that you feel appropriate. And customers need to sort of realize that climbing in that center is still a privilege. And to climb in that center, you have to play by the climbing walls rules effectively, and all of the instructors, you guys out there, all of our climbing wall managers, they're all qualified people. They know what they're doing. They know what to expect in their climbing walls. So customers need to play by those rules. You can't come in as an external instructor and do what you like just because you have a badge. So yes, please feel free, absolutely, to have conversations. There was a comment came in, surely it's better to ask and be sure rather than say nothing and then something bad happens. Absolutely, have the conversations. So there was a couple of really good questions came in there, especially there's a couple of good ones from Powell, but we are going to call it a hard break just now. We are going to break for half an hour. We will be back at 12 o'clock for the second part. And in the question and answer section later on, after Raymond's presentation, we will get to the questions that we've missed so far. So if you have asked a really good question just now, don't worry, we will get to you because I really like them and I want to discuss it. Excellent. Yes, everybody's back. Fantastic. Everybody's on it. This is good. Hope you're all still sitting there. Hope you all haven't fallen asleep already. You got something to eat, you got something to drink, you're refreshed and ready for Raymond's presentation. So Raymond, being duty manager of Westway, his presentation and experience is all around the sort of practical element, what we deal with in climbing walls, how to deal with situations, and how we encourage our customers in climbing walls to show good practice when they're belaying. Shall we hand over to Raymond? Are you guys ready to rock? Brilliant, brilliant. Cool. All my panelists can hide their videos, mute themselves. Raymond, take it away, buddy. Give me a shout when you want me to make the polls live. There we go. That's it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can everybody see that? You can tell I'm really good at this. Okay.
So, take it away.
Hello, that's me. I'm Raymond. I've been working at Westway for 10 years now. I started climbing back in 2010. A friend introduced me. After that first session, just fell in love with it and wanted to do loads of it. After the first month of climbing, I got my yearly pass at Westway and came close to 2 or 3 times a week. You know, it was great stress relief for my day job. But during that year, I got offered I went for a coaching position. So then I transitioned out of my retail job, did the 2 days of instructor training, and then completed the 20 hours of shadowing that were required for the Westway. And then I became a climbing coach, which is there. Just go back. There's me. So first question, I know Rob kind of did this already, but where are exactly people from in the country? So that should come up soon.
There you go. Poll is live. Where is everybody based? I'm going to say, given all the comments we had earlier, I'm going to go for majority Ireland.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully there'll be some England-bound brothers and sisters of climbing.
Oh, yeah, I think England's got it here. A few more people still to answer. Hopefully everyone's actually back from their lunches.
Yeah, well, if not, I guess we can call it there.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Majority England.
Hey, welcome, brothers and sisters.
A few from Ireland. Nobody from Wales this time.
Oh.
Nobody from Wales. Or maybe they're still away getting lunch.
Got to get onto the marketing department for that. So the next several years after I got my job was spent, training, which is part of the BMC stuff, but training, getting injured, learning, assessments, passes and fails, lots of instructing. That was kind of private lessons, NICAS groups, school groups, lots of birthday parties, and then eventually the performance climbing squad. Along the way, the Westway introduced the BMC training modules and their own modules, which covered various skills and development. So learning about Abseil, Prisux, lead climbing, better movement, escaping the system, rescues in the wall, self-rescue, I guess, climbing performance. This was just to help, upskilling of the instructors to be qualified and valued staff. So where is it? There, a better version. So on to being a DM. The Climb Wall in 2016 conducted a self-build of 3 new climbing walls, which I've only got 2 of here. And what they needed to happen was to get more duty managers or train up some more duty managers. And we kind of did it mostly in-house, but it helped with helping with the daily operations of the centre. So just floor walking and kind of registrations, things like that. So it was that was 3 days of training. I think it was about 8 weeks of installation time. Lots of DM shifts, as you can see, litres of paint and wall shield and things like that. And once they were done, I got offered a regular shift as a DM. Yeah, that's me. So currently I do both coaching and DM shifts, but also more recently doing route setting for the boulders and climbing the wall. So being a DM, I should have asked this earlier. Are there any DMs? If you are, then say so in the Q&A. If you're not, no worries. But being a DM, it was like most people, it was a start of a new job. I found it exciting and challenging. Stumbled through various issues that I came across, mostly with kind of the customers when floor walking. These were, the kind of things that we would see, or I would see, and have to interact with whilst being a DM. It's pretty frequent that we see this, and if you don't work in the centre, then you don't have to deal with it. And I guess a bigger question could be, should we intervene, even though we're not in a position of intervening? But who can say? Let's see. So this, I'm going to share what the worst thing I've had to deal with in the wall. This is just a visual, but if you can imagine that there was a climber hung upside down via his rope, and I'll just go through what happened. So I was on a NICAS group session. We were climbing, we were doing our thing, and then we hear a loud leader fall into the wall, so like a big bang. I heard them all before, and I guess you have as well, and I thought nothing of it. And then one of my kids said, he's upside down, just like this photo. So then I glanced and I saw that the guy was upside down, the climber was upside down, and he was kind of moaning and groaning a little bit. And then I looked at his belayer, and his belayer seemed quite confused. He didn't know what to do, so he was trying to manipulate the rope to get his climber down. Whatever he was doing didn't work. And then I guess in the instant he decided to let go of the dead rope, which he didn't know was bad, and then tried to pull the live rope out of the belay device. So I saw that. My kids were on the ground already, but I kind of immediately stepped away and grabbed the dead rope, just to try and understand what was going on and not allow the climber to hit the ground. So this next one. All right, so can people see the mouse, Rob?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll do this. So the climber was hanging here, and here, there's no climber, but he was in his harness, he was tied in. This rope is going up to the clip. This is to represent that the rope somehow, and I can't remember how, it cinched around his ankle. So no matter which way the rope would not go anyway, it just held him there. So he was suspended fully by his own weight via his ankle, hanging upside down like the last picture. And then this is just to represent going to his belayer at the time. So at the Westway, we have these next to our auto belays, and that's to help rescue, but there isn't anything here set up like that for an incident. So because I was tailing the rope, I was trying to problem solve how to get this climber down, and I think I rushed a bit because I wasn't the DM, and I wasn't kind of in that frame of mind. But I stepped in to try and help. I tried a few solutions which didn't work, but in the end, I ended up sending this closed looper rope, and there's this carabiner which is fixed, so it's open so that you can direct it to wherever it needs to go. So I did it over here with this rope, and I brought it over, and then he could attach that, and then we could essentially hoist him up, get his weight free from the rope, and try and free his leg, or he can try and free his leg, rather than making it quite complicated and sending somebody up and all this kind of stuff. Generally, the easiest solution is the best one. So we hoisted him up, and then during that happened so quickly, I said to my kids, can you please go get help? Which eventually the duty manager came, and with a clear vision, he's like, okay, yes, Raymond, pull really hard, take his weight, and then we brought him down. So that's one of the most challenging events that I've had to deal with as a non-DM. And I guess this leads on to the question of, is there something that you've had to deal with whilst at work? Rob, if you can pull up that one.
Yeah, there we go. Next poll's live. So what is the worst level of incident or event that you've had to deal with so far? I know I've had to deal with a couple. Luckily, oh no, I was about to say no life-altering ones, but I'm forgetting.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I've had to deal with a few in my career.
There's lots of non-serious ones that I've dealt with on sessions, like I guess ones that if you're not experienced, then you won't know what to do. Like long hair in a belay can be a frightening one. But if you have the tools and the experience to deal with it, it's actually not that bad. You know, the serious bit is, did the person get a bit hurt when their hair was pulled, or it just depends.
Yeah. So 50% of people have answered already. Come on, guys, you were better than this before. Get your answers in. What is the worst level of incident you've had to deal with so far? It's really, it's quite good to see that nobody's had to deal with a life-altering event. That's a positive. I'm glad you all haven't had to deal with something like that. It's not pleasant when it happens.
No, there was a similar scenario, not that I'd had to deal with it, but the climber still comes back now, but he had a similar fall where his leg got caught by the rope and then unfortunately kind of decked. And the lady that he was climbing with was belaying him. Unfortunately, I've not seen her come back. And that was a while ago. So it's not a pleasant thing to be obviously dealing with.
No.
I think we can call it there. Well done.
Yeah, let's call it there. Yeah.
Okay.
So most people that responded have had a fairly serious accident, something that's required some medical attention anyway. One person having dealt with a life-altering. I think I actually know who that is.
Okay. Well, hopefully it wasn't too severe and it's that person is okay, but thank you for sharing, everybody.
Absolutely no worries. Yeah, thanks for for answering the question, guys. Take it away.
So not being infallible myself. Come on, slide. There we go. So here are some of my own near misses. I'll give you a second to kind of digest the auto belay one. I'll have to explain the bare wall over here, but I was having a personal kind of auto belay session myself. I can't remember how many I did, and I know I was rushing because this was before lockdown, so the auto belays can get quite busy at Westway. Lots of solo kind of climbers that don't want to climb with anybody else, maybe because they've had incidences, but I can only speculate. But I ended up doing this. So if you can notice that the nose is caught on the belay loop and the gate is just kind of biting. It was actually quite hard for me to try and get this photo for it to sit like that. So I must have done something especially wrong when this happened. So I was going up and I came down. I don't know how many laps I did, but when I went to change, as in when I went to hand the auto belay to somebody else, I glanced and there it was. And yeah, missed a massive bullet on that one. And then on running this abseil over here. So the standard practice is to, if you're going to run an abseil, you make it releasable. And we use these large steel beams with a sling and a static rope, which is then configured so it can be releasable. If something should go wrong, you can always get the climber down, and there's always a top rope set up, a safety rope to help get that person down. So I'd run my abseil with my customer and I was rushing. So what I would normally do is, this rope here is a top rope, but it's too far away to kind of reach from this platform. So had I have grabbed the rope and placed it there when I was setting up, it would be fine, but I hadn't done that. So my abseil rope is set up. And then I brought my customer down, and in a rush, I just kind of attached myself to this abseil rope and just went down without a backup. I mean, you can back yourself up in many ways, but the abseil line was just on this one sling. I kind of realized partway down and looked up and thought, oh darn. And then just continued very gingerly down until I got onto the ground. So again, had that sling blown, I would have decked. Not something that I'm happy about, but I use it to reinforce my checks. So a second poll, Rob, is please share if you've had a near miss. I think it's possibly the norm, guys, Yeah,
I hope all of this is yes. We have all had near misses. We've all learned the hard way sometimes. Anybody that's had any experience in climbing has all made a little mistake. And even if you caught it at the time, it could have resulted in something quite serious. We've all made mistakes. I know that in the 27 years I've been climbing, I've made a fair few mistakes, and luckily I've caught them before before anything serious happened. But nobody is immune to mistakes happening. We've all had them.
Certainly. I can't see the panels, but I'm sure there's some heads being nodded everywhere. And okay, yeah. Please share if you don't want to. That's fine. Right, Rob. Let's have the results.
Most people said yes.
Okay, thank you for sharing, guys. So that, I guess, informs. Where's the next slide? Yeah, that's why the centres have these signs. It's the statement. Do these. I mean, I wasn't with somebody, but you can still squeeze test for the auto belay, lifeline check, and that kind of stuff. All right, so that's me. What are we talking about today? So group upskilling, what I did and how you could approach it. How I intervened whilst the DM then and now, and my format for when I do intervene. So this is a regular group that comes to the Westway, the Gamma group. This is Jeff. He's he leads the group, or he's the president of the group. He communicates to the group if something needs to be mentioned, and I think he vets he vets people if they want to join in. You have to be a certain age, so it's an elderly climbing group that come regularly to the Westway. It has about 20 members. 2 of them are over 80 years old. Harry is one of them. He's 86. He started back in the 50s. They come to Westway every Monday and Thursday. There's so much experience there. One member, I think her name was Daphne. So on Mondays, I duty manage, and the Gamma group would come and climb at the centre. So when floor walking while they were in attendance, it was quite uncomfortable for me, because essentially I'd see a lot of poor practice, a lot of poor behaviours, poor belay technique, belay devices and ropes kind of misconfigured. So you could have the dead rope facing the wrong way, the carabiner kind of upside down, letting go, slight let goes of dead rope, just again those kind of things that we see a lot of. And after a number of kind of interventions, trying as I best as I could, it was very challenging to the group, because you've got, again, all this kind of experience and wealth of experience kind of looking at you. They started climbing before I was born, so it's kind of intimidating, which what somebody said earlier, how you approach somebody who's flashing the badge and has got all this experience. And I think it's more important to intervene than kind of shy away. But after a number of interventions, unfortunately, an awful term is, oh, you know, the belay police are coming. So, you know, that didn't sit well with me. And, you know, oh no, that's the wrong slide. I wanted to try and upskill the group so that it would purely make my job easier. Again, I don't want it to be uncomfortable. So, you know, it made my job easier. Hopefully it would refresh and upskill the group, develop a better relationship with the group myself, and then, you know, get them coming back to the wall. And then I think the other bit is, you know, if they got injured or hurt, injured climbers can't come back to the wall. So what I did was I kind of asked around the group ahead of my proposal of kind of instigating some micro workshops, you know, going up to each pair and asking, you know, if I held a free kind of micro workshop, would people be interested? And I think it kind of helped sell it to the group. So then I went to speak with Jeff, and I offered this short free workshop on, I think I presented it as new skills or refreshing or new updates to belaying, because I think it was the best way to word it, rather than saying, you guys belay really badly, come and see me and get some tips or updated. So I did that, and then the attendance was good. Oh no, the attendance was good. The members were interested, and it enabled me to lead into other things rather than just kind of poor belaying. And then they also were keen to kind of suggest things to which direction to go. So we kind of covered better lead belay technique with either, you know, John, you have to remind me what the terms are, but you know, with a mechanical device or with a friction plate. Kind of discussing reasons of good practice, maybe what to do if something happens, taking leader falls and catching leader falls, and then kind of less distraction whilst belaying. We continued for a number of sessions across the months. And I was noticing that the group were becoming better attentive to each other when belaying, you know, improved awareness, not letting go less, not that I could see everybody every time. But one thing that they would do is kind of nudge one another if they caught somebody not paying attention, or they would step away if they were going to have or try and have a chat while somebody else was belaying. I thought that was really a really good result from just having this little workshop of 15 minutes every time. So after this lockdown, I want to have, the next one is Monday. So my desired outcomes were to make my job easier. It was just completely selfless, you know, and better belaying, hopefully some partner checks. But, you know, the actual outcome was a positive experience and kind of reinforced learning. A couple of comments are that, you know, Ray, we really like how you deal with interventions. It's enjoyable, it's positive. So again, better relationship with the group. Some of them have asked for performance sessions, so I'm happy about that. Okay. Is there any groups that are coming to your climbing walls, guys, that you could try and do something like this to? Is just a shout there? I'm going to blanket say that there must be. How you do it, I don't know, because I'm, of course, not at your centre. I don't know your clientele, but I think it's possible. I really think it's possible. Okay. I guess we can close that one, Rob, unless.
Yeah. About half, 50% of people have voted so far. If you haven't voted, get on it, click those buttons. Bit of a mixed answer on this one.
Yeah.
I think a few people kind of unsure because, I mean, unless you've already thought about doing something like this with a group, it's hard to take this idea and apply it to people that come into the wall. But if you guys go back into your climbing wall now, you might see groups in the wall and go, oh, actually, I could do this kind of thing with them. I know of various groups that go to climb walls across Scotland that would probably definitely benefit from something like this. In fact, most groups would definitely benefit from something like this. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag on this one.
Yeah, okay, but thank you. All right then, let's see.
But it's good to see that a lot of people have recognised, yes, I definitely could do something like this with.
I suppose the hard bit might be what I'll touch on later is how. The how is the hard bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so on Wednesday we have Student Wednesday, and these 3 universities have mountaineering clubs. And before lockdown, the dreamy part of life, they would come every Wednesday and they would fill the wall. They would really fill the wall. Capacity before COVID at Westway was 300 plus people. So you could definitely say, and we have 108 walls, including, so that's lead lines and top rope walls. So if you can imagine, there could be a three of climbers on each rope, not necessarily the lead lines, but it would be full as a kind of visual for people to kind of lock onto. So with that amount of people, the main issues were kind of poor rope tailing and novice supervision. So because it was freshers, there would be, I guess this might be the same across the country, where you have your supervisor and ideally 2 novice people as climbing. So the novice is a climber, and also the other novice is the belayer, and then the supervisor is tailing the ropes. But that wasn't happening all of the time. So what the Westway did was to try and have something like what I did, but not a practical, more verbal. Hey guys, whoever's supervising, please make sure you stay on the ground. Please don't leave the floor. You are there to ensure that nobody has an accident, because you are in charge, because you are supervising. You have agreed to be the supervisor. Okay, so with the people that are kind of unsure about what to do, there is the lead climbers and top ropers that come to the wall. It could be some kind of banner. The Be a Better Belay campaign could be posted up somewhere, and there could be somebody, or hopefully somebody, standing and able to stand there and kind of promote better belaying, or promote a time when the wall can do it. Of course, when it's busy, it's a bit harder, but it's something that could happen. But some top tips for that would be, of the groups, find out who's in charge. I believe they'll have some kind of duty of care to the group that they're kind of in charge of. So, that can be something that you appeal to as the position that they're in, that they could fulfill. Everybody loves a freebie. That's it. Everybody loves a freebie. If it doesn't have to be paid for, then I guess they'll eat it up. Here's a difficult one, keeping it short and sweet. I did these workshops when I was a DM, so of course I was being paid to be at the wall, which I can understand if people aren't being paid to do it, then it's a bit more challenging. I can understand that. But if you are able to do it whilst on shift, I think the key here is to be consistent with it. Try and get it started and try and do it at the same time, on the same day of the week, so that it can kind of build up. You'll have one person on the first couple, or maybe two, hopefully, that they can belay one another and hopefully build and provide reference for participants. Oh, we did this last week, or we did that 2 weeks ago. We'll touch on it again. And also allow input. It allows them to kind of have ownership and empowers them to make decisions about what to learn or where to go for the workshops, and gives you something to kind of look into as well. Okay. So DMing now and then. So that was the difference in floor walking now and interventions now is very, very different. In the past, I was kind of trying to be the best belay enforcer whilst on shift. I really didn't have, I guess, the soft skills in approaching people. I think our site-specific training doesn't touch on it enough or impart enough how people might react or how you could use language better. I don't know if it's the same across the country, but a typical scenario which we might have all had to deal with is something like this. So there's me. I am the belay police, and then as the DM, you walk around and you see this kind of thing or this kind of thing, and then you'd have a typical exchange where, hello, I saw you do these things, and then automatic response is, no, I didn't. And then it goes a back and forth of, no, I didn't, yes, I did, no, I didn't. And then ultimately here, the qualification drop or the name drop of what they've done. Oh, listen, I've done the IGA, mate. I can climb 8A. Buzz off. I've got first descent here. Well, they won't show you their SPA badge, but I've got SPA. I've got, I'm a CWI. I'm an IRATA level 3. And you continue. Well, can I talk to you about what I've seen? And a reluctant agree to kind of discuss it. So then you go through that, and can you please behave like this? And oh, sorry, that's the guy reeling off what he's done. Yeah, so can you please behave like this? And you kind of get this expression. So thank you, and then whatever. I think that's quite a typical or a stereotypical interaction of when you DM or have to intervene. It's not the way that it should be. Lots of kind of similar interventions like poor belaying, unfortunately negative outcomes. I guess what I've learned over the years is, try and remove your ego from it and don't make it personal. These people might have had some really negative interventions in the past, and they don't know that they're letting go of the rope, or they don't know, or they're not aware of what it is that you've witnessed and are trying to draw attention to. So going from being the belay police officer and having a radar of whilst floor walking, I'd rather try and become this intervention guru, because a lot of climbers, won't understand the reasons behind it. and it might be how they've been taught, and it's just that's it. You know, it's gone from the person that taught them is that's it, that's how you do it, and then they've really focused in and honed in on that. Okay, so be understanding, guys. They don't have to have, these people aren't required to do best practice training. You know, you're challenging some some muscle memory experience, and you know, it's gonna be hard. Again, people will kind of say it's how I was taught, you know, and that's fair enough. That's, you know, understandable. But I guess also, you know, rather than I told you so, you know, try and be polite and professional, and not take it personal. Earlier, you know, dealing with it, if the person isn't kind of responding, then, you know, it can become a management issue, or an upper management issue, where they have to intervene because you've had to unfortunately speak to this person so many times. They're just not using the centre in the way that they've agreed to. On, you know, every centre has paperwork. I'm sure it's quite standard that every centre has, you will abide by such and such criteria, and they sign it. I mean, they might not have read it, but they sign it. So this is my intervention kind of pathway. Sorry, there's a lot of bullet points. I'll just kind of go through it slowly. So I introduce myself when I need to intervene, my role at the centre, and the kind of tasks and jobs that I do there. You know, essentially floor walking is the one that I'm talking about here, and looking out for kind of poor or dangerous practices. People, when intervening, generally take on a negative bias, which is okay. But when intervening, I make them aware, and I say, unfortunately, no matter how I say this, there's kind of a negative skew on it. So I understand that. I then present the issue, and if you can take a video, it really helps. But it depends on what's going on. If there's a person that has no clue, then okay, you're going to be tailing. But yes, the video does help. Well, if they're climbing, I show them the video of the poor technique and the potential danger. Suggest the best practice, or allow them, or demonstrate myself, and then allow them to have a go, which is allowing the time to adapt, because you can't speak to someone for a minute or so and then expect them to learn what it is, especially if it's belaying, or an issue with belaying. I always try and say that this is an awareness exercise, and if it's, again, the way they've been taught, then that's the way they've been taught. I then ask the climber what they think about what I'm showing. Sometimes they agree, but not always. I felt that it's always a slightly better interaction, rather than kind of turning up on the spot, kind of barking something at somebody, and then that's it. You walk away, and, you know, there's no value there. There's no lesson. But always end with deleting the video and then moving on to the next person. So I'll expand upon those points a bit more. So I don't know, at your centres, you might have like the traffic light system, which the Westway doesn't have a traffic light system. I kind of checked our what was it? Our intervention paragraph in the training, and it says essentially, if you see something, go and tail, and kind of intervene anyway. And how you intervene is not specified. So this is something that I've kind of come up with. But depending on what's happening, I know there's kind of obviously red, green, amber, and red. Amber would be that they might be letting go, or like the video that John showed where the teacher, you can see what they're able to do it. It could be tidied up. So, you know, that could be an amber. A red would probably be where they just, you know, the hands are getting mixed up on the dead rope, or they're letting go quite frequently. They're kind of looking around. They're not really paying attention. I suppose it, again, depends on if they're top roping or lead climbing. But if it's a red, then I would tail immediately. Now, should you intervene, you know, always do it to make it better, not worse. But once you start tailing that rope, you'll have the belayer glance over at you, which is when I say, "Oh, keep going, carry on," despite them, you know, poorly belaying. You're backing up the rope. So if something happens, hopefully nothing too catastrophic will happen, because you know you're there. You can stop that from happening. So I'm tailing the rope. I allow them to finish. I bring them down to the ground, and then I kind of start with the introducing myself and why I'm intervening. If I'm able to show the video, I'll show them the video, kind of highlighting parts of the video that I needed to intervene for. You know, the question, did they know they were doing this? Probably not. So with that, then I'd say, okay, so this is the next, this is the good practice you want to try. And again, allow them to try it, because you're not able to break a habit that quickly. You know, they've been doing it for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. So a lot of muscle memory there. And even though you're for the better intervening, that kind of 5 minutes with that person is quite hard to challenge that time of experience. So again, you've got to kind of be understanding that they may not be able to adopt it quickly, but hopefully they'll understand what you're doing. So once the practice has happened, you know, again, I ask the climber what do they think, because when you're climbing, you don't know what your belay is doing. You're focusing on trying to send the 7A and get that top. So you're not concerned with what the belay is doing, right? Sometimes agreements happen. Again, I've used this on a customer recently. They didn't agree with what I had to say. Okay, and that's fine. You know, not take it personal. But then, you know, delete the video and try and make it a positive interaction for all. And then, you know, go on to the next potential climber, intervention. So what's next? I think I might have skipped something here, guys. But anyway, I had this thought when I was kind of doing this talk, where have you gone up to anybody and actually commented positively about their belaying? I'm going to say adults only, rather than if you coach NICAS and all that kind of stuff, because there you're supposed to give positive and not negative feedback, but feedback, be it positive or negative. Have you been able to kind of say to somebody, "Oh, yeah, you belayed that really well"? Again, openly, I don't think it's something that I've done a lot of. I did try it yesterday when I was floor walking, and I think it was appreciated. The customer said, "Oh yeah, you said something to me before, and then I realized such and such," and I was actually surprised that he commented and remembered. So it can be helpful to try and be more positive about the behaviors rather than always being negative. So, you know, maybe try it. It's something that I'm going to, moving ahead, try and do and instigate, and hopefully it will have the outcome of better belaying all round, or better uptake of better practices whilst belaying at the wall or at other places. So in closing, guys, thank you very much. I have to thank John for inviting me to speak today, and Robert and Damien and Scott for their support. I was really nervous about giving this talk, and hopefully it's kind of highlighted a few things that you can move on with. And of course, if you have any questions, please, you can email me. There's the Gamma Group URL, and that's my Instagram. But yeah, please, any questions, hopefully we'll answer them now. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well done, Raymond. Well done. I know you were nervous about that, buddy, but you did a really good job there. It was really good to hear from someone that's got current practice that is doing this kind of thing and hearing what actually happens in a climbing wall and how we deal with it. I think that is going to be really relevant to the people watching this. So yeah, well done, dude. Well done. You did good there. Can I have all of my panelists back? We will do a question and answer section again before we wrap it up for the day. As is always, everybody that's watching, if you've got questions, please fire them in the question and answer section. We'll try and get through them all just now. I'm hoping that you're all sitting there typing. Hopefully your fingers are numb, you're typing that fast. Do we have Scott? There he is. Scott is back. Excellent. So while we're waiting on some questions coming in, there was a couple of things that was kind of discussed earlier, or questions that we missed from earlier that we can go over. There was a couple of comments in the chat and in the question and answer talking about the gaswork method of belaying with a gree-gree. And you know, the gaswork method has been around for a long time. It has been around almost since the gree-gree was created, and it wasn't Petzl that came up with this method. It was, you know, it was a thing that kind of got developed by some climbers in Germany, and the DAV picked it up. They made a video on it, and Petzl actually support this method of belaying with a gree-gree as well, and they've made a video on it. So the gaswork method is a genuine belaying technique with a gree-gree, and it's been around for a while. And if you don't know what it is, go and look it up. You know, we all, you know, as instructors, we've all been around for a while, but we're all okay with having, you know, gaps in our own knowledge, and we still need to pick up new skills and keep up to date with current practices. And I'm going to show you, if I can figure out where it is. Yeah, there it is. So I'm going to show you what the gaswork method is. Can we all see this? Okay, so this is the video that Petzl themselves came out with. So Petzl have decided that this method is a genuine method of using a gree-gree. I'm hoping that this video causes you guys to go and look this up properly. Yeah, don't just take this as gospel. Go and look it up. Go and do some research. If you don't know what this is, go look at it. But here is what people were chatting about earlier for those that don't know it. So making sure you're still holding the rope with at least 3 fingers. That little finger just supporting the gree-gree, not underneath the gree-gree. So you're not grabbing the whole device. And then the thumb compressing the cam, so it allows you to feed out rope. And then importantly, you let go of the cam again. Okay. And that's the gaswork method. And this is why, it's important to recognize what the gaswork method is and know how to do it, because there's a difference between just having your finger on that little lip on the gree-gree and holding the whole device. And there's a difference between temporarily disengaging the cam and permanently holding the cam off. So if you're not familiar with the gaswork method, if that was a new one for you, go and look it up. Go and do some research. Petzl have got videos on their website, so have the DAV as well. So there's a link in the question and answers that you can check out as well. Cool.
I'll just say something about the gaswork method.
Hit me.
All I was going to say was the reason it's a very weak way of disengaging the cam by having your forefinger and thumb, which is why it's the way to do it, as opposed to a very poor way of doing it is to disengage the cam by grabbing the whole thing in your hand and just pulling the rope out. By doing it in that way, it's a very, your hand isn't very strong. So if the climber suddenly falls off, you won't be able to keep the cam disengaged.
Yeah, and I've tested that exact thing. It's really easy to, even in a fall, if you've grabbed the whole device, it's really easy to keep the cam disengaged and the gree doesn't do its function. But with just your finger and thumb, in a fall situation, I couldn't hold that down, and I consider myself relatively strong. You weren't all supposed to laugh at that. So there was a couple of questions came in from someone, I can't find exactly where it is, but I've got the questions here. And they were saying that they're a new rock climbing instructor hired in a small wall, a casual rock climbing instructor. There was the term, I love it, casual rock climbing instructor. And they've noticed some bad practices, stuff that is definitely not as like by the book perfect, and is wondering whether they should intervene and insist on a better method, or whether to even have a conversation. And the methods that we're talking about was when lowering someone with an ATC, having one hand on the dead rope and one hand on the live rope, kind of this position, rather than having both hands on the dead rope. Is that acceptable? And if it's not, should they insist on having both hands on the dead rope? And the other example they gave was when belaying with a gree, when you're taking in slack, you take in slack and then slide your hand up the rope rather than changing your hands like we're all used to with the 5-point system with manual devices. Are these methods accepted? Are these methods okay? Should they be challenged? Should you be insisting on a certain method? And just from my own point of view, before you guys jump in, because I'm sure you guys want to chip in your knowledge here, but there is no single way of belaying. There are multiple ways of belaying that are still good and good practice. What makes the difference is whether someone is well practiced and well versed in their method, whether they're safe in doing their method. The example of belaying with a gree and sliding your hand up the rope, that method is called tunneling. It's a commonly used method, not just in the UK, but around the world. It's not what we see instructors generally teaching in climbing walls, but if that's the method someone's using and they're never letting go of the dead rope, they're well practiced in doing that method, they catch falls a lot, and they're safe doing that, then okay, fine. It is a good method and they need to be well practiced in it. At that point, I wouldn't even have a conversation, But if they're doing it and they don't know why they're doing it and they're not very practiced, then that's up to you to decide whether to have the conversation, whether to show them a different way. And the same deal for the lowering people with one hand on the dead rope or both hands on the dead rope. Ideally, to have more control of the rope, you'd like to have both hands on the dead rope, but it's up to you as a floor walker, as an instructor, to determine whether that person is actually safe in the practice that they're doing, whether they're well practiced in it, whether they do it a lot, or whether it's just a bit of a gap in knowledge that you can step in and provide some information. But that's just my kind of thoughts. Have you guys got anything to add to that?
I suppose what I'd say regarding the second one, then culturally, exactly as you say, Rob, culturally in the UK and Ireland, we tend to swap hands on the dead rope, other cultures tunnel. I suppose my take is that if you teach one way of belaying, which is swapping on the dead rope, then it'll work for all belay devices. So I suppose that's the way I approach this. But exactly as you say, Robert, if someone's holding the dead rope, below, down low, and they're tunneling on a gree, then it would be, it'd be hard to imagine that something really untoward will happen if they've got really good contact with their rope. But I would suggest it is preferable to swap hands. But it's a cultural difference in the UK. And similarly to the top question about lowering, I'd always have both hands on the dead rope, inbuilt redundancy, why just have one? That to me is an easier thing. It's a conversation to have with somebody, to ask, to make it aware that if they had two hands, there's a bit more inbuilt redundancy than having one.
Yeah, I at the Westway we teach swapping on hands on the dead rope, and personally, if they're down climbing, then you're paying out rope. So one hand is on the live rope and the other one is on the dead rope. But I always educate people that that's not lowering, that's paying out rope. So you have to decide whether they're being lowered or down climbing, which is, I guess, quite easy to visually see. But I think some people kind of get the two mixed up. So I think it's just, okay, are you lowering or are they trying to down climb as the action?
Yeah. Is this a common issue in Ireland, Damien?
Not that I've picked up on, Rob, no. I think it's pragmatically what works for a person. And I guess if you take the the swapping hands versus tunneling thing, if you think of abseiling, effectively, what we're doing is kind of tunneling the rope. We're putting our hand around the rope, hand around the rope, letting the rope pass through our hands. And it seems to work pretty well for abseiling. Lowering a person really isn't that much different to abseiling. So I think it works. There's a big difference between taking a broad grip on the rope and just letting the rope smoke through your hands. And you effectively lose control there. But when you're keeping close control of the rope, good device orientation, just like John was saying, keeping your brake hand low, you're in a very controlled position.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a couple of other comments that have come in. In fact, there's a bunch of questions came in around this very thing of tunneling or swapping hands, or what's the BMC and the ABC's view on the DAV's tubing technique, i.e. tunneling. And it's up to kind of you as a floor walker to decide whether what they're doing is dangerous because they've got a lack of knowledge, and what they're doing they're not very well practicing, or whether this is someone that has been climbing for a long time and that's their preferred method of belaying. And if they're not doing anything dangerous like letting go of the dead rope, if they're still holding the dead rope with one hand, they're still holding the dead rope low, then that might be acceptable. But there are different methods. Just because in the UK we generally teach the 5-point system, swapping our hands, and we teach people to lower people down with both hands on the dead rope. That's not something that happens across the whole world. And our climbing walls are very culturally diverse these days. We will see different methods. If there's something you see as an instructor, tunneling, if you're not very well versed in tunneling, then that's maybe a gap in your knowledge that you need to work towards as well. I know when we started talking about tunneling, I had no idea what anybody was talking about, and I had to go and skill myself up in that. But just because there's different methods doesn't mean that they're all bad. There are different methods that are all still good practice.
Something that though, Rob, I think there are methods which, when we look at them now, they just don't seem safe. And I think back to when I worked at the climbing wall. I worked at a climbing wall in Cork, same wall that Andy works at now. We used to get a lot of Americans coming to the wall, and they would have this system where they would, when they would bring the rope through, they would like hold it up here and do a big hand swap. So the whole device system was open for a really long amount of time. There was a lot of hand shuffling, like up at eye level. And you'd ask them, where did you learn that? And that's what they were taught at walls in America. And maybe that works well with something like an Italian hitch or Munter hitch, maybe other devices as well, I'm not sure. But for a tube style belay device, it just doesn't seem like a good idea. It doesn't seem like a good use of that piece of equipment. So trying to encourage them away from that. I think if I see that sort of belaying now, I'm going to go kind of and say, yeah, that's wrong, because there's so many better ways of doing it now. It's kind of moved to the side. Actually, it's not bad practice. It's just wrong practice. So sometimes you just got to call it out. Look, that's incorrect practice. It's wrong practice. It's a little more than, it's more than less than ideal. It's downright wrong, bad. I think you got to be able to put things into that position as well.
Yeah.
It's like if you have the ropes parallel, exactly as you say, Damien, it's wrong, and the manufacturers say don't do that. Big skull and crossbones in their instructions. And the Italian hitch is an interesting one. I know of I think he's Austrian climber, and it wasn't so long ago, and he was belaying with an Italian hitch at a wall in Manchester and told that, not to do that. And it's sort of like you say, Damien, things have moved on, and I think there are a variety of things here. A wall may have a policy like you need to use a belay device, and if you don't like that, then don't climb up that wall, you know. And there are much better ways to belay in a low friction environment than an Italian hitch, you know. And Italian hitch may work when you're trad climbing in the 50s on lots of, you know, but not in a modern climbing wall. And I think it'd be interesting, Raymond, you know, I wondered if you had any thoughts about in engaging with people in a climbing wall, you know, about how they may operate and belay. Is also a first stage, you know, what for a member of staff to understand, or for the climbing wall to have a policy, because if a climbing wall has a policy about X, Y, and Z, then the staff can refer to that policy, and that empowers the staff and empowers the wall. You know, so you may have a simple policy like, you know, no Italian hitches or something, I don't know, but that's quite an easy thing. But when it comes to how people belay, you know, that people are expected to belay in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. I mean, does the Westway have that? I mean, I wonder if other walls just have simple policies that staff can refer to, that empowers them when they are trying to engage with their customers.
In the terms and conditions of use of the wall, from what I can recall, it does mention that you have to remind me of the terminology that you used, is the geometric and mechanical, and what's the other one, John?
Manual.
Okay. So in the terms and conditions, it would mention a manual belay device should be used. Please refrain from using an Italian hitch. That was when I first started, and I think the wording's changed so that it's a bit more open. You know, I think it still recommends that a manual device be used. But going to what Robbie said, which was, you know, there's a lot of experience. There was one, I think they were European, but I can't put it down to more than that. They were actually using Italian hitches, and we were kind of gathered round watching, like, what's going on here? And they were on a leading wall as well. And then I think the facility manager then we just kind of like, well, what do you reckon? And he said, well, look at her belaying. She's doing it. She's got a good position. She's watching her climber. It looks like she's been doing it for bloody ages. And I know in Europe, it's pretty much kind of accepted as a skill. You'd have to go to a wall and find out what their terms and conditions say. But if, you know, he was happy with that, she was doing it very well. Had it have been someone who just doesn't know what they're doing, then okay, we would have probably gone over and said, listen, yeah, we're watching you, and we feel that it's quite dangerous, and do you have a belay device? And we would probably allow them, if they didn't have a bloody manual device, then okay, here's one, please use it, and please return it afterwards. You know, just still facilitating that they could climb, but just in a way that we feel is a bit more comfortable for us as a centre and possibly people around, because there is that, is it the halo effect, where you see things, you go, oh, okay, maybe I'll have a go at that. And then, oh, you can imagine the domino effect of, oh, if they're doing it, I'll do it. Oh, okay. Yeah, so there are some things which I can't recall, unfortunately, that the Westway does stipulate in terms and conditions. Like you know, we want either a figure eight or bowline, but they must be stopper knotted. They can't just be on their own. And again, we see that a lot with a lot of the Europeans. And again, kind of echoing what I said, if that's what they were taught and they know it's safe, you know, we all know it's safe, but and the conditions of how it's tied, you know, I know that a lot of the kind of European instructors really intensify that your figure eight knot will be beautiful. You will dress it beautiful, you will tie it beautifully, and you won't climb until it is beautiful, which I know is a verbal way of kind of making people conform. But I guess if you were to see some of the knots that you would have to intervene on, in comparison, they're not fully dangerous, but they're just so sloppy, is the best description I can say. And you've got these, you know, these quite well experienced climbers, really well dressed knots. You know, you have to go up to them and say, sorry, could you please put a stopper knot on there, even though they know that it's fine. We know it's fine. But again, it's just conditions of the center, isn't it? That you have to meet, because again, if something goes wrong, then there's the duty of care there, isn't it? And that's an important thing to kind of be aware of and not ignore, I feel.
I think one of the points Ray just said, sort of really, really relevant, is the sort of, if you see somebody's doing something slightly differently in the wall and you want to know more, you go and look at it and think you can practice it, and that's when accidents sort of happen. So something that's completely different and out of the realm. So somebody belaying off an Italian hitch, I think Damien was saying times have like certainly moved on, and for a wall, somebody to see that being practiced in a wall would be quite alien today. And if people looking, oh, I should try that, it just starts that domino effect of incidents, then to accidents, then to serious accidents, and really want to try and stop that as soon as possible, really, and really give other people an opportunity to use, give them a plate or something different. Don't be afraid to say this is our policy. In our wall, our policy is to use a belay device, and this isn't a belay device. It's a carabiner with a rope through it. So you're not fulfilling our terms and conditions. And realistically, again, it's a privilege to climb a climbing wall. So if you're not going to follow the rules and conditions of use, take that privilege away. It is that simple to a larger extent.
Can I just make a comment on the penultimate Q&A from FAMCG, which sort of leads on from what we're talking about here, saying how some people might grip the whole degree because it hurts a finger, when you use the gaswork technique, etc. And this leads on from you're saying, Scott, in as much as there's sort of the simple thing, isn't it? Is to, in a climb will say, time with a figure of 8, I would suggest, not a bowline myself, just because it's easier to check, visually for everyone, and use a recognised belay device as opposed to using a Italian hitch, and use that belay device in line with manufacturer's instructions. So I suppose, therefore, in reply to the observation I just mentioned in the Q&A, it's like, if you don't like using a gree like they suggest because it hurts your hand, use a different belay device. It's like that's the whole point about all of this, is like, use the belay device, use it properly. If you don't like using it how the manufacturer says how to use it, then don't use it. Use a different one. Yeah. We can overcomplicate it, or we can just keep it really simple. What does the manufacturer say? Use a device like that. If you don't want to use it like that, use something else. And then the policy is like, use a device like the manufacturer says. And then you don't overcomplicate it. It's not us telling you this. It's just what's the manufacturer saying.
Yeah, exactly. Question kind of I had, someone alluded to it earlier, I can't find exactly where it is, but a question I had was, if we're seeing techniques that people are using in climbing walls that we don't recognize, or even if we do recognize, but we don't know whether they're doing it because of a lack of knowledge on their part, or whether they are actually very well versed in doing that technique, how do we go about finding that out? And I mean, the simple answer is go and have the discussion. Go and ask people. As floor walkers, like Raymond said in his presentation, you're not only there to tell people off for doing bad things. You're there to converse with customers. Give positive feedback, have conversations with people, and if they're doing something that you recognizing isn't quite by the book picture perfect, but you want to find out more, go and have the conversation. Ask them, if they understand exactly what they're doing. When the way you're doing this, how do you make sure that rope is locked off the whole time? If they're doing the tunneling method, how does that work in the event of a fall? What is the dangers of doing it this way? Having these conversations will give you the answers to whether someone is actually well practiced in that method and knows what they're doing and is doing it in a safe way, or whether they've got a lack of knowledge, and that might be a more of an amber territory where you might show them a different technique or show them a way to make that safer.
Yeah, if it's different, it doesn't mean it's wrong. just because it's different. But the realities of what we do is, it's fairly simple. Belaying is a fairly simple process, and it's what we do, and it's fairly similar for every device you use. So if it's different, it isn't wrong, but certainly don't jump in and start thinking, I need to change it because I don't know. So that's probably not the right approach. Use it as a knowledge, an opportunity to learn. I used to tie bowling all the time, and I used to go into walls and tie bowlings, and staff didn't understand it. So some of the staff didn't understand it. Maybe some of the junior staff that had never sort of seen one before. So instead, I just stopped tying the bowling. I just tied a figure of 8 because it made my life a lot easier. Don't be awkward for the sake of being awkward because you know something better than somebody else. You don't need to. You don't need to. Well, I can tie bowling, and I'm tie a figure of 8.
A question just to put to Ray and to John. If you kind of think back 10, 15 years ago, you had a pretty standard tuber type belay device and a gree. That was kind of it. You can argue figure 8, Italian hitch, but most stuff at walls it was a tuber or a gree. Whereas now you got a whole kind of range of different styles of manual device. You got the geometry devices, some really specific. You need this type of carabiner with this type of device. If you don't have that matchup, it may or may not work as designed. You got a whole range of different mechanical devices. So for instructors, flow workers, it's got more complicated. What's your thought as an industry? How do we kind of gather up all that knowledge or kind of share that knowledge? So for a climbing wall, to make sure that junior members of staff, new members of staff are going to be reasonably familiar with that range of devices out there. What could we do? What are the key kind of differences in devices? Or does it kind of come back to John, to your kind of point, keep your hand below the brake line of the device? Do you kind of focus on the behavioral stuff, or do you need to get into the nitty gritty of the technicalities of each device?
I think there are two sides, aren't there? There are fundamentally, you pull a rope through and you hold onto the dead rope, and that's true for all belay devices, and you keep your brake hand low, you pay attention, you do your partner check. So if you follow those simple behaviors all the time, then you're like 90% of the way there. But like you say, Damien, it's actually, when you feed it out, so like the click up's a good example to me. Whenever I've used one, I find it really good for bottom roping, top roping, whatever you want to call it. But I haven't quite mastered how to use it for lead climbing. It always seems to click. But then that's me not being familiar with it. So that's not the device, So yeah, there is definitely, aren't there? You have to learn how to use them, and it goes back to the manufacturer's instructions. I think it's really, as you say, much more challenging for people working in climbing walls because you can't be abreast of all of them. But there are some universal behaviors. If someone's not paying attention, if someone's not holding the brake rope, if someone has loads of slack out and someone could deck it out from the 3rd or 4th clip. And that transcends all the kind of the other stuff about how you use a certain device with perfect method and perfect skill. So I think it's distinguishing. So don't sort of get blindsided by the minor detail whilst ignoring the big kind of blatant kind of problem of this belayer who's standing 10 foot out with a great big load of rope on the ground for a lead climber. That's the thing to intervene on.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. And yeah.
I think for one of the things we used to do when I sort of operated a climb wall was anytime a new piece of gear come out, I'd ensure that we got one, and we'd have staff use it. And they'd take 10 minutes at the start of the shift. Come and have a look at this. And I think that's important. That's important for walls to do that type of 10-minute sort of quick. Let's go and have a look. Don't rush through it, of course, but that can really boost people's knowledge, but also keep it fresh in mind that there are always new things coming to market. So we just need to be aware of that. So again, go back to, because it's different, it isn't wrong. John's saying that the actual 90% of the way there is the belaying is fairly universal. Handle the dead rope, you pull in the slack. It's just the device that's changing. So just work. We would always have make sure if a new bit of kit came out, we'd get one. Or equally, if a climber was in there using one, we'd ask to have a look at it as well. So, and we wouldn't be shy to do that, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the amount of times I've walked up to someone and go, I've never seen one of these before. How does that work? Cool. Yeah, like John said, the method that we use for belaying, lead belaying and top rope belaying, is universal. Every belay device that's brought out on the market is all designed to belay in the same way, you know. So those techniques will be transferable, you know. And if you see someone that's just doing the practice, doing that method in a weird way, it doesn't matter what belay device it is, you know. That's a kind of a flag that you might want to pick up and either have the conversation or just keep an eye on. Excellent. Well, right. So there was one more question came in here, and unless you guys really want to tackle this because it's going to open a can of worms,
John should.
I'm going to say that this is a better belaying webinar. You know, we should probably focus on just that. However, the question that came in is, do stopper knots make figure of 8 knots safer?
So yeah, I'll answer that. I mean,
Yes.
a bowline must have a stopper. A bowline must have a stopper knot. Otherwise, the knot isn't complete yet. So a bowline has to have a stopper knot butted up against the otherwise the knot can easily fail. A figure of 8, you know, if you should have at least a tail of I don't know, 4 inches, 10 centimeters. If you don't have a stopper knot, then the knot should not fail. You know, you make a very neat knot, you pull it really tightly, and you dress it. So in answer to the question, then fundamentally, no, it shouldn't fail at all. However, the reason for doing a stopper knot on a figure of 8 is actually to ensure you've got enough rope through. So you can only do a stopper knot in a figure of 8 if you've kind of pulled enough rope through as a kind of little tail. And if you don't tie the stopper knot, you've got this little tail flapping around which can get in the way. So in a way, it's tidying it up. But the function of the knot, like I say, isn't going to fail if you don't have a stopper knot. But then people are tempted to have a very short tail because they don't want a big tail flapping around. And then it is problematic. That is my take.
Yeah, exactly. Like I completely agree with that. You know, in theory, if you've got a well-dressed figure of 8 that has enough tail at the end, 10 centimeters or more, fist length, whatever you want to go with, that knot is not going to fail. Okay. But why do we expect to see stopper knots in climbing walls? Well, because it's really hard for a floor walker to wander around a climbing wall and gauge if everybody's knot has exactly 10 centimeters or whether it's 9 centimeters or 11 centimeters, Whereas if there's a stopper knot there, it's really easy for floor walkers and your partner, when you're doing your buddy checks, to recognize instantly that that is enough tail there. So the figure of 8 with a stopper knot, the stopper knot doesn't stop the figure of 8 coming undone, but the stopper knot ensures that there is enough tail there. So while it doesn't make the knot safer, it ensures its safety, I suppose.
You think of safety critical industries, aviation and medicine are good examples, and they make a massive use of checklists to manage risk. Checklists are really, really good ways to manage risk, and that's why a partner check before you climb is basically a checklist, and that's why it's a really good way to manage risk. And think of a stopper knot also as a checklist. If you can't tie a stopper knot, your tail isn't long enough. Therefore, you have to retie the knot so you could tie a stopper knot. So it's a way of having a kind of a checklist as well on your knot. That's another way of looking at it.
Yeah. Okay, final question. This is the last question that's come in, and I think we could probably wrap it up there. Someone said, Ray, that they really liked your top tips for approaching wall users for interventions, your top 3 tips. That's gone down really well. And I think it's really, really important that people have, their own system for how they deal with these interventions and what we're looking out for, that kind of thing. But what would everybody else's on the panel, what would your top 3 tips be?
Could you remind me of your 3 tips, Raymond?
I'll just bring it up on the. It was to be, understanding of the climate or the belayer, the person. Old habits die quite hard. It's probably the way that they've done it or been shown or been told how to do it way back when, and always to be, nobody likes to be told off. So, don't threaten somebody's face, no matter what they might say back to you. I think that's what Ian Smith?
Ian Smith, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. I think it's a perspective of just kind of being understanding. Don't know, being diplomatic, but just you don't. It's more about, I guess, being positive or trying to be positive about the scenario, despite something possibly like a near miss happening. And you could react in a telling off way, but I think it doesn't work. I really think it doesn't work. I really think if you go in there with that mindset, it kind of just makes people become very defensive and essentially switch off to exactly what you're saying. That's my doorbell. And the message that you're trying to convey, are you trying to tell them off for not being aware, or do you want to try and actually make it better for them as a climber, as a customer, for your centre?
I guess for me, one would be self-awareness. So how would I react in that? How would I react in that scenario if somebody came to me? It's really important to understand how you would feel in that scenario. You've got to be really careful around that as well, because you're not just impacting the person that you're talking to, you're impacting others around you. And so self-awareness is probably to just be aware of yourself and how you are and your approach, because I think that's really important. Sort of emphasizing what Ray said, really, but that there's the immediate in front of you, and then there's the wider audience, and they are going to be impacted on what's going on there. So you just need to be aware of that. For me, the a tip, I guess.
Yeah. Something that I've seen at Walls a few times is where you have an instructor group or a coach group, and there's a floor walker, and they're not quite happy with something in the group. And what I've seen happen is they kind of go straight in, kind of, 2 legs in, up to the instructor, kind of give out to a member of the group who's under instruction. And it just sets a really poor dynamic, so the instructor is now made look incompetent, or, well, the instructor is made look incompetent regardless whether it's themselves directly or somebody under their supervision. And a way I've seen it done better is where, the floor walker or supervisor just ask the instructor, would you mind just pop back up to the reception desk here, just to take them out of this situation if they can, and then just have a little chat. Look, Johnny, I've seen you with the belaying there. There's something a bit weird about it. Would you mind, tighten that up a bit or whatever? Just have a bit of a chat so you're not making them look a little bit foolish in front of the group. I think that's something that's worked really well. Just a general thing of, smile, be pleasant. Don't go in like rugby tackle style. If it's important, or like I think it was Ray was saying earlier, just tail the rope and just start having a chat, just like, so kind of reassure and make it gentle. If somebody's novice and they're making a mistake, they probably don't know they're making the mistake. Just going in screaming and roaring at them is just going to stress them out and make the situation worse. So I think kind of 3 things I'd be kind of doing is try to remove the instructor from the situation just so they're not going to look poor. Reassure a person if they're making a mistake they're unaware of, and just smile, just kind of go in there pleasant. You're always going to get a better reaction.
That tailing the rope thing, by the way, Damien, is really, it's quite impactful for instructors. Instructors that are actually teaching, if they see you do that, the light bulb goes in their head a lot of the time. Like, oh, I should be doing that. So, and that's like a really indirect way of ensuring that people are doing the things they should be doing. It's really, really powerful indirect way of doing it. Instructors that are switched on, they're click. Oh, yeah. Should be there.
I think my top 3, I sort of think like, if I saw a toddler playing with a knife, I'm not diving in there to tell the toddler off. I'm diving in to save the toddler from harm. Yeah. So it's about my motivation, my intention. And to me, that's about sort of generosity. Just before I step in and have a conversation, just sort of be clear. I'm in the right mind frame. exactly as we're all very much in danger of agreeing here, by the way. So exactly as Raymond was saying, it's all about empathy, being in their shoes. To me, how would I want to be approached? And then, like for me, like Damien's saying, it's about timing. You know, basically giving feedback is all about timing. If a feedback to be most successful, timing is really crucial. And which is sort of, I guess, what you're saying, Damien. You know, you need to think, how I'm gonna sort of frame this feedback. So those are my three: sort of generosity, empathy, and timing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really add much more to that. You guys have said everything. I completely agree. I mean, I always approach situations with, you know, that bit of empathy, that bit of understanding. Like, you know, I've made mistakes. People make mistakes. It's not that you are a terrible climber, you know, or a terrible belayer. It's, you know, these mistakes happen sometimes. It's okay. But I always approach the situation with questions, with intrigue. You know, I like finding out what people's level of knowledge is through questions, and that bit of guided discovery. You know, asking questions to make them think about their own practice. You know, if they realize that they can't answer a question, a safety question, they'll have a much more impactful learning experience of, actually, I need to know this, rather than you just stepping in all guns blazing and going, you're doing this wrong, you know. So yeah, I always, similar to you guys, like I'll always approach something with it, that bit of empathy, that bit of understanding, and always aiming for that bit of guided discovery and letting them learn what they don't know. Because at the moment, you know, they don't know what they don't know. I'm trying to get them to figure out themselves what they don't know. And trying to, you know, figure out whether it's just me that has got it wrong. You know, sometimes that happens. You know, so as floor walkers, we walk up, have conversations, and actually we're the ones that got it wrong, which is fair enough, and you got to own that.
On that, Rob, I did a thing where somebody pretty much rugby tackled me when I was with a group. I was using an Edel with Eddie. You know, from a distance, it looks like you've loaded up the wrong way around, because that's how it looks.
To be fair,
just, you know,
it's an Eddie. Rugby tackle just for owning that thing.
Well, but yeah, I think it's on your, you know, so you know, if the person kind of lost face a little bit, but, you know, fair enough. John's point, it was a good intention, but just really poorly delivered.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. That is actually all the questions. That's all the questions that came in. It was fairly quiet today, actually, but thank you very much to everybody that's put in questions. Very, very much appreciated. Good discussions. Cheers for being so interactive. Huge thank you to both of our panelists, John and Raymond. You guys did an awesome job. Thank you so much for all that. Brilliant information, well delivered. Thank you, Raymond. I know you're a bit nervous about that at the start, but I think you did an awesome job. I think everybody else will agree at home that you did a great job there. Damien, Scott, thank you for being here for the question and answer thing. Likewise, your experience is very valuable for this kind of thing. So yes, thank you very much to our entire panel here. And huge thank you to everybody sitting at home for joining in. We know that this is the fifth webinar, third, fourth, something, and another webinar that we've done. And it's great to see you guys still engaging. And I hope that you're getting a lot out of what we're doing here. And I hope that you're appreciating seeing all the NGBs getting together and providing this kind of thing. It's definitely been a really positive experience from our end. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for asking your questions, being so interactive, chipping in your own experiences as well, answering the polls. It's been absolutely fantastic. We did manage to get through all of the questions there. But if you guys want me to get written down answers so you can provide them to your staff or other colleagues or whatever, let us know. We can easily do that. That's fine. And the recording for this will be out on a YouTube channel. We'll send you the link in time. Scott from the ABC, he is going to be sending out all of that information to you once we have it. But as always, if you have questions that you didn't get to ask here and you think of something later on, you'll have Scott's email address. He'll have already contacted all of you. By all means, flood him with all the questions. He'll either be able to answer them himself or he'll contact one of us that can answer it. But yes, Scott.
The next webinar, by the way, will be a NICAS webinar. So keep your eyes out for that, guys. get all your instructors involved. Really, really good webinar to attend.
Fantastic. Yes, NICAS webinar, a return to group activity. Finally, it is on the horizon for most places if you've not already managed to do it so far. So yes, we are very much looking forward to the NICAS one. Thank you all very much. A few thank yous coming in from some of the people as well. So well done to all our panelists. We're going to let you guys go. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We'll hopefully see you for the next one. Any questions or anything, get in touch and we'll send you all the information soon. Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
See you for the next one.